Hey there, chatters. I'm Nat.
And I'm Kat, and welcome to the Crime Chat. I am your forensic femme fatale. Natalie is your true crime addict connoisseur.
We're just two normal girls who obsess about dark crimes, evil minds, and occasionally the unknown.
And here's your disclaimer, chatters. The following Crime Chat contains adult content and descriptions of mysterious, weird, unknown, violent scenarios today. So your listener discretion is advised.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. So you've been warned. Before we get into today's Crime Chat, Kat, what have you done and where the hell are you?
I'm in a cockpit. We're flying. It's going to coincide with our story. So this is the cockpit of a Boeing 777, and I'll get into a little bit of that.
I love that you put the Crime Chat on the dashboard, on the...
Crime Chat in the sky. Let's see. So I finished The Fall of House of Usher, and I loved it so much. I wanted to watch it all over again. It was so good.
Yes.
So good. And I don't know if Chris didn't get it. He's like, what's up with the eyes? He's like, did he carve her eyes out? And I was like, those are the sapphire eyes.
Right.
He's like, what's sapphire eyes? And I was like, did you totally miss that part?
Yeah.
Like, when he ordered the sapphire eyes for his sister. Oh, spoiler alert. If you haven't watched it.
What was that connection? With that connection, though, with the sapphire eyes is because he kind of envisioned her as like this queen.
Yeah.
Like in his head, that's who she was. So he, in a way, maybe it was his way of preserving her.
I think so. So the eyes were kind of in a way, so their eyes would never be shut forever, for them to see in the afterlife, be able, so their body may go, but they'll be able to like live. It's like it has to do with an afterlife.
Yeah.
So he ordered this artifact of sapphire eyes that were used in mummifications.
Yeah.
That he bought for his sister and ended up using them.
Yeah.
It's fantastic though.
It is.
So Augie, the character that Augie plays in the original poem or short story, so the original poem short story is first person. Mm-hmm. So that would have been from like Augie's perspective, when the whole backstory of their friendship and kind of how it all happened and everything that all the way through the fall of the house and the family.
Right.
So
and
it was really cool.
And Augie is the police officer, right?
He is an attorney, so
oh yes. Forgot about it.
Roderick was like, I need to confess.
Yeah, so he's Augie, technically.
Yeah.
But because I'm like, did they have an Augie? They didn't have a character named Augie.
August. His name was August something, and Roderick called him Augie.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was the lawyer.
So what else have you done? Anything else that's exciting?
Just diving into this story that is Chatter's going to be 2 parts.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no way we could fit it into one. And if you don't know, we're going to be going over the Malaysian Airlines MH370 Disappearance. So that is going to be 2. Honestly, it could be multiple parts, but we're going to break it down into 2. So
yes.
So I've been doing a lot of investing in trying to get my facts right.
You're going to try to get it into 2, but it can go into 3 if you need to go into 3.
Maybe.
You never know. Never know.
Never know.
I haven't done anything worthwhile via Netflix at all, actually. I've just been working a lot. Yeah, that's about it. So, I suck this week. Totally suck. Hate weeks like this.
So the other thing that we've kind of been watching, so my husband, I guess, started watching The Boondocks.
Okay.
The animated series. I think it's on Netflix.
Is that Snoop Dogg?
I think so, yeah. These 2 kids, what is it, Huey and Riley are the 2 kids, and they live with their grandfather.
Okay.
So I think he started watching it at work, then he started watching it at home. It's kind of silly, but I think it's got some good human nature, lessons in it.
Oh, yeah.
Treating people right, but anyway. Yeah. The first one I watched had, who does Pimp My Ride? Is it?
Oh, I don't know.
Exhibit.
Okay.
Exhibit on MTV. He has a TV show that's called Pimp My Ride. And that was the first episode that I watched, where Riley, the younger brother, called Exhibit and said, my poor grandfather, blah, blah, blah. Gave him some fake sob story to get Exhibit to come out to the house to pimp his ride. Simultaneously, Ty, something that used to do home makeover, where they come and completely demolish and rebuild the houses. he did that, like, the little kid did that at the same time. So you've got Exhibit showing up, and then you've got Ty with his whole crew showing up. And he told two different stories. Like, he told the grandfather had some sort of disability. I can't remember what it was for the Pimp My Ride, but he told Ty and the producers of that TV show that his grandfather was blind. And he wasn't. He's like, Granddad, just go along with it.
Oh my God.
Anyway, it's funny. Like, I don't know. I would have never started watching it. Mostly, I guess because animated, but not that I'm against animation. I just prefer the deeper, darker, realistic stories.
Yeah. And also SAG is making a deal, thank God.
Yes.
I think what was holding them up was AI, which I understand.
Sure.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So, Kat, before you get into your story, I'm going to do an intro on airplanes that, airplanes. Sometimes we lose them. Sometimes they disappear. Sometimes, like, where'd they go? I mean, it's a pretty big thing to lose. I mean, it's not like...
Before you do that, have you ever watched the show Manifest?
No.
It's on Netflix. And next week, while I'm on vacation, your mission is to watch Manifest and tell me if you think it's related to this story. Chatters, let us know what you think.
Okay, I will do that. Mission accepted.
Yes.
Challenge accepted. And I just realized, just so you know, so I went to get my nails done last week. I asked for a pumpkin color.
Yeah.
And I got traffic cone. So.
That's hot now.
Wait. Traffic cone. Yeah, I got traffic cone. So I'm like, whoa, that's bright. All right.
Goes along with our warning.
It's Okay, so airplanes, like I said, can be lost or experience accidents or disappearances in various locations around the world. Some notable areas have gained notoriety due to mysterious disappearances or challenging flying conditions. Here are some of those known areas. The Bermuda Triangle. Also known as Devil's Triangle, it's a loosely defined region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. It has gained a reputation for the high number of aircraft and ships that have disappeared under its mysterious, murky waters and circumstances. While traveling through the area, I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming that, like, we don't avoid the Bermuda Triangle, do we? I don't think we do. We fly over it.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, my mom went to Bermuda on vacation, and I was so scared that she was going to not come back, that she was going to disappear.
Because you knew that the plane was going over the Bermuda Triangle.
No. Yep.
But I don't think the companies, what's the word I'm thinking of?
FAA, the Federal
FAA. Yeah.
Federal Aviation Administration.
I don't think they avoid the Bermuda Triangle. I think they
No,
fly.
I
I think
think
they're
so.
just like, let it ride. Let it ride. Let's just go.
Yeah.
So scientists and aviation experts consider that these claims are unfounded and the Bermuda Triangle is not officially recognized as a hazard to air travel. That's what they said.
Although there's no explanation for the things that have disappeared.
No. And a lot of big things disappeared. A lot of big ones.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. Remote mountainous regions. Aircraft accidents can occur in these areas where the terrain makes search and rescue operations very difficult.
Yeah.
Examples include the Himalayan region and other mountainous areas with challenging weather conditions.
And we've had some of those for, like, being in the Air Force. We've had a couple of times where I've been stationed where the jets were doing training, practicing maneuvers. There was some sort of mechanical failure. And one time the pilot ejected, but he didn't make it. The other time they couldn't find the pilot, so they assumed that the pilot didn't eject.
Oh boy.
But they found all the damage. So,
but they have tracking now on those pilot ejectors. Like, they can track people now. Unless your airplane is stealth, because we just lost a stealth airplane not so long ago where it's like, I'm missing, where are you? We can't find you. We can't find you.
That's the point.
I know. You're really good at your job. Okay. All right. The next one, conflict zones. Regions experiencing armed conflict or political instability can pose significant risk to aviation.
Yes.
Aircraft may be shot down, targeted, or face challenges due to airspace restrictions.
Let me tell you, one of the most scariest things I have ever experienced is something called a combat landing.
Okay. Oh.
And that's when, let's say you're flying into a combat zone, for instance, when I was getting deployed, and, of my multiple flights that I got there, when I was finally getting to my destination, the planes did a maneuver called a combat landing.
Right. What's that about?
And it's basically movements that the plane would make that if a surface-to-air missile was shot at it, it would miss it.
How the hell do you, what is it like? It's like the equivalent of sticking your toe in a pool. Like they just
Testing
testing the waters and just throwing you out. Like how do you get out?
They just rotate. I don't know. They just rotate back and forth. So if a surface-to-air missile was going to be shot at it, they would likely miss it because they can align like their targeting system from the surface-to-air missile onto the plane because it's maneuvering.
Oh my God.
So it's called a combat landing. And that is one of the most scariest things I've ever had.
Ever
experienced.
That must be like the ultimate roller coaster ride. Your stomach must be like in your throat. Because I can only imagine what that feels like.
I was just always wrenched down as tight as I could.
Right.
And I just kept my eyes closed. And I was just praying.
That's all you could do. That's all you can do. My God. Okay. Well, so I also collected 5 of the most mysterious incidents involving airplanes. Your story tonight actually ranked as number 1, which I completely avoided. Okay. So we're going to start the list off with 2. Number 2, Flying Tiger Line Flight 739 back in 1962. The military charter flight disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. Despite search efforts, no wreckage or bodies were ever found, leaving the cause of the disappearance unsolved.
So 60 years ago, I mean, we still don't know, and we'll never know.
No, the ocean, it doesn't give up, it's dead.
Yeah.
You know? Number 3, Egypt Air Flight 990 back in 1999. The crash of Egypt Air Flight 990 raised controversy as investigators concluded that the co-pilot intentionally caused the crash, but the motive remains unclear and disputed.
It could be a little related to today's story, but we're not going to talk about theories, but I'm just going to tease that a little bit. There's a little breadcrumb.
A little nuggie. A little nuggie.
A nuggie.
Little pin.
Like, I'm flying and Nuggie's my co-pilot.
You should have put Nuggie in there for part 2. Put Nuggie in there.
Scooshy and Nuggie.
Oh, fuck. Your plane's going down. Okay, number 4, Pan Am Flight 914 in 1955. I remember this. There is a documentary on this. It's really freaky. So this was a famous UFO-related incident. This commercial flight allegedly disappeared for several hours, and upon reappearing, the crew and passengers claimed to have experienced a time lapse. There was a Stephen King movie called The Langoliers that was loosely held on this flight. Have you ever seen it? Where like these little furry little like troll monsters are eating up time. I mean, it was a movie back in the 80s.
It just reminds me
silly.
It just reminds me of the original Star Trek series, the episode The Trouble with Tribbles, the little furry things that got all over the place.
Oh, but what did they do? What was their
I don't remember.
It's like a gremlin situation?
Yeah, kind of. And they just kept multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Oh. The episode is called The Trouble with Tribbles. And I remember that because we then had a dog that we called Tribble.
That's a cute name.
Yeah.
And the last one, Star Ariel and Star Tiger disappearances in 1948. 2 British South American Airways planes, Star Ariel and Star Tiger, disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle within a year of each other, contributing to the mysteriousness of the region. Now, one notable mention, Amelia Earhart, disappearance 1937. Amelia Earhart's attempt to circumnavigate the globe ending in her disappearance over the Central Pacific, and her whereabouts still today remain unknown, although people have been like producing pictures of her. Hey, look at her. She's over here with this tribe. Yeah. She's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think they did land, maybe crash landed somewhere, but there was no means of communication. It was the 30s. Like, they had no way. I mean, they could have telegram, I guess, but I don't know. I think that she did actually land, but that's just me.
Yeah. Either way, she was very brave to do what she did.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, that's my little intro, but I hope that set you up a little bit for your story.
Yes. So going back to your list, number 1, we're going to go way deep into it.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
There was something else that was coming to, it'll come to me.
This is your captain speaking. We're about to take off. This is a CrimeChat flight. We're destined to unknown.
Please make sure you keep your hands and arms in.
Yes.
As the beverage cart will be coming down the aisle.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right, so on March 8th, 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 disappeared off of radar as it was mid-flight from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, en route to Beijing, China. There were 239 souls on board. How does a major airline just disappear? There was so much that just didn't add up, and we're going to kind of get into all the meat and potatoes of it. Was it hijacked? Was it a mechanical failure? Was it a meteor? So many theories, so many twists and turns about what happened to MH370. This was nearly 10 years ago, so coming up in March is going to be 10 years.
Feels longer.
It does. It does feel like it was a lot longer. I'm sure not to the families, but like it does, like 10 years. I anticipate that we're actually going to probably see something on the 10-year anniversary. Why don't we still know what happened?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, as I mentioned, this is going to be a two-parter. There's going to be some of the details that I'm going to go over today. We're going to talk about some of the families who lost their loved ones and details of the incident, what is known. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about the theories. We'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
So MH370 was scheduled as a red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur. It would fly through the night, and it was due to arrive in Beijing around dawn. Just some real quick facts about this type of plane. The MH370 was a Boeing 777-200ER model. The Boeing 777 is commonly referred to as a 777. It's American-made, developed and manufactured by Boeing Commercial Airplanes. It is the world's largest twin jet and the most built wide-body airliner. It was made originally to bridge the gap in framework between the 767 and the 747, and then also replaced the aging DC-10 and L-1011 tri-jets. Whatever that is.
I have no idea what that means, but I'm going with it.
The prototype was rolled out in April of 1994, and first flew in June of that year. The 777 entered service with a launch operator, United Airlines, in June of 1995. Longer range variants were launched then in 2000, which were then delivered in 2004. So I don't think they're still making the 777, other than maybe upgrades and that kind of thing. Now, as for flight MH370, everything appeared to be routine. There were 227 passengers, and there were 12 crew members. A majority of the passengers' nationality were Chinese. I mean, they were flying to Beijing. They had 153, followed by Malaysians, obviously leaving from Malaysia. There was 50. There were 3 Americans on board. And then the other nationalities included Australian, Canadian, French, Indian, Indonesian, Iranian, Netherlandian, New Zealanders, Russians, Taiwanese, and Ukrainians.
Okay.
Before I get into what happened, I want to mention a few family members who kind of shared their story with some of the research that I've done. I watched the Netflix series before. I watched it over again, validated some of the information. I've kind of pulled and compiled a lot of information together, but I'm going to talk about 3 family members, and these are their stories.
Okay.
Number 1. One of the crew members was Hasreen Othman. His wife, Intan Othman, also worked for Malaysian Airlines. They had 1 daughter, and at the time, Intan was pregnant, so she wasn't working. It's like she wasn't flying. Kuala Lumpur to Beijing was a daily flight, and Hasreen worked that flight many times. The last time Intan saw her husband, she remembered Hasreen that he was packing his fluffy jacket because it was still winter in Beijing.
Right.
Hasreen called his wife right before the plane took off, and she remembered the last thing he told her was, "I love you."
Oh.
On the morning of the news, Intan said everything was normal. It was routine. And it was normal for them to like send text messages when if either one of them were working to say, "Hey, I'm here, we made it," or call. She did wake up early that morning and hadn't seen a text yet, but she was like, I'm sure he'll get to it. So she went back to sleep. She never got a text message, and she never got a phone call.
Oh, boy.
When Intan found out about what happened, all she remembered was crying and basically thinking the unimaginable had happened to her. So the second one I want to talk about, one of the passengers, his name was Paul Weeks. He's married to a lady named Danica. They had 2 young sons, and they lived in Australia. Paul was getting ready to start a new job in China, and he would work basically 28 days in China and then come home to Australia for 14 days. It's not a bad gig. It's a pretty good thing. Before Paul left, he asked his wife, Danica, are you sure you want me to go? She said, yes, of course. And then at the airport, they all kind of went, the whole family went, and when Paul's plane was called to the boarding area, she said it was emotional. There were a lot of tears. The kids, of course, 2 young boys, daddy's going. The boys blew kisses. Paul said, I love you. He walked through the door and his family would never see him again. On that morning, Paul sent Danica an email from the airport that was titled, Miss you already. He ended his email with, you and the boys are my world. As soon as I land in Beijing, March 8th, I'll give you a call. Danica was in the kitchen that morning and got a call. It was a lady. She was calling to ask for Paul. And she said, well, I'm sorry, he's on a plane. Who are you and what can I do for you?
Right.
She said she was a reporter from the New Zealand Herald. She asked, what do you want with my husband? And the reporter said, haven't you heard? Danica replied, heard what? The reporter told Danica there had been an incident with the plane. She said that she remembered dropping the phone and went outside screaming.
Oh my God, that's a horrible way of finding out.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Horrible. Oh.
So another person I'm going to talk about, his name is Ghislain Wachtrelos. French citizen Ghislain Wachtrelos. I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. No parlez-vous français. He was a French citizen living in Beijing, but he was away on business, so he was actually flying back into Beijing, and his family, his wife and his 2 children, were also flying into Beijing, but his kids went to school in Malaysia, and they were on a holiday. They were on holiday break. Mm-hmm. So basically, Dad was coming back to Beijing from a business trip. Wife and kids are going to come up and have some time off together. Mm-hmm. The day before the flight, Ghislain spoke with his wife and she assured him, we're all good, everything's planned. On the day of the flight, he got a message from his daughter saying that they were at the airport, getting ready to go from Kuala Lumpur. And it said, quote, I'm happy because I'm going to see my daddy again, end quote. Ghislain arrived at the Beijing airport around 4 p.m. on March 8th. When he got off the plane, there was a hostess waiting for him. And she said, sir, follow us. He had no idea what was going on. And when they told him the plane his wife and his children were on had disappeared, at that moment, he said the time just absolutely stopped for him. Yeah. How could this happen? Is this a nightmare? Wake me up. He asked her, are you sure? And then they answered, no, we're not sure of anything.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So just reading that, I got chills. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, okay, the incident. At 12:42 a.m., March 8, 2014, MH370 took off and had a flight time of 5 hours and 34 minutes. It was a clear night. Everything seemed to be calm. It was routine. The plane climbed to cruising altitude and headed toward the South China Sea. At 1:01 a.m., the captain contacted Lumpur radar saying, Malaysia 370, maintaining level 350. Basically what this means is we've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and they did confirm that again with radar at 1:08 a.m. This is where things start to get a little strange. The plane was about to leave Malaysian airspace and would be handed over to the air traffic controllers in Vietnam. Malaysian air traffic control contacted MH370 and said, contact Ho Chow Ming 120.9, good night. Signing off, essentially. Air traffic control tower from Malaysia was signing off to the plane.
Okay.
Saying, contact Ho Chow Ming, which is the name of the air traffic control of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Good night. Good luck. Farewell.
Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay.
That is normal. Okay. So when you're changing airspaces, and you have to go from one air traffic control to another air traffic control, somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to be monitoring, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have, as a pilot, you would need a point of contact, at least one point of contact to be able to have a mayday, or if there's some sort of emergency or something like that.
Right.
The captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, responded, good night, Malaysian 370, signing off. Mm-hmm. Saying, farewell, Malaysia.
Okay.
This was around 1:20 a.m., and they were expected to make contact with the Vietnamese air traffic control once they reached the end of Malaysian airspace, but no contact was ever made. Now, within 90 seconds of the captain's response to Malaysia saying good night, farewell, MH370 went dark on radar. It vanished.
Oh my God, that's freaking me out. It's freaking me out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It literally just disappeared.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is where the mystery begins.
Okay.
Crisis director for Malaysian Airlines, then, his name is Fuad Sharjui. Okay, I'm going to butcher his name, Joe. Fuad Sharuji.
Okay.
He was contacted about an hour later after it went missing, 2:20 a.m., and he was told that the flight disappeared from the system. And this was very unusual.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. He responded immediately and went to the emergency center, and he said he was numb, he was nervous. Right away, they contacted Hong Kong, Vietnam, Taiwan, and would ask them all to try and communicate with MH370. All attempts were unsuccessful. They're scrambling. Things are just going crazy. Not knowing what to do. From about 4 to about 6:30 in the morning, they were calling all the airports they could think of, all air traffic control, anybody who would have any hopes at any point of knowing or identifying if MH370 had landed. Working as diligently as possible, it had been 5 hours since anyone had heard from or saw MH370 on radar. Something was terribly wrong, and by 6:30 in the morning, local time, the flight should have landed, and it made international news. They were getting calls from CNN, Fox, BBC, just everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, 7:30 a.m., 6 hours since last contact, Malaysian Airlines issued a statement 1 hour after the scheduled arrive time, saying that communications were lost. Neither the crew nor the aircraft's communication system relayed a distress signal, indications bad weather, no technical problems, before it just completely vanished off a radar. Then head of civil aviation in Malaysia, his name was Azharuddin Abdul Rahman, and said that search and rescue efforts were underway. Standard procedures indicated that they were going to go to the last location where the aircraft was seen on radar and kind of go out from there. The emergency center actually got a call saying someone who was working on an oil rig in this part of the South China Sea saw an explosion, and it probably crashed in the ocean. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
MH370 had 7 hours worth of fuel on board. The flight was only going to be about 5.5 hours, so they had extra, just in case emergency having to reroute or whatever. And this meant, with 7 hours of fuel, by 8:30 a.m. local time, it would have run out of gas. As you can imagine, this disappearance went viral also on social media and around the world. Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you remember hearing about it?
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Some started to claim it was hijacked. Some said it crashed into the jungles of Java. I didn't know what Java was. It's an island of Indonesia, and it's interesting. It's the world's most populous island. And it's home to 56% of the Indonesian population. So all of Indonesia, 56% of the population live on this island. 151.6 million people.
What? On an island? How big is this island?
Great question. I didn't think to
when I think island, I'm thinking it's got to be the size of like Manhattan.
To be determined.
To be determined.
I'll be back. So not knowing what the truth was, Emergency Center had to look into all possible theories. They were getting all kinds of tips. Social media was flying everywhere. They spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened. And of course, the families at this point want to know what happened to their loved ones, and they just don't have the answers. So now Vietnamese Air Force at this time had spotted some large oil slicks in the area of southern Vietnam in the South China Sea. And each of those slicks were about 6 miles wide.
Wow.
And also, a Cathay Pacific pilot reported seeing a large solid debris in the ocean during a flight from Hong Kong to Kuala Lumpur. The captain of another Malaysian Airlines pilot from MH88 was en route to Tokyo. They were asked to try and make contact with MH370 on their emergency frequency. They were about 30 minutes ahead of where MH370 was.
Okay.
So the pilot tried. He said there was a lot of interference. Like they answered, there was interference, there was static, but he heard mumbling on the other end.
Oh, okay.
Calls to the flight's cockpit at 2:39 and 7:13 a.m. went unanswered. But they were acknowledged by the aircraft satellite data unit that they had received the call, but it just went unanswered.
See, that sounds like a hijacking. It sounds that way, but I think there are a lot of unanswered questions. You're going to get into it. Okay.
Yeah. So family and friends of those who were at the airport, like awaiting arrival of their loved ones, they were all sent to this hotel basically to kind of get them away from the airport. The airport kind of still had business to do, but like, let's get you all gathered together, keep you all together, so whenever we have information, we can give it to you all together. This was also bombarded with news outlets. In a press conference, they announced that they were working with authorities who have activated a search and rescue team to locate the aircraft, and their team was currently in the process of contacting all the next of kin of all the passengers and crew. Gisèle Witros, the French citizen who lived in Beijing, he was one of the very last family members to arrive at the hotel. If you remember, he flew in later. Like, he got there about 4 p.m., so he was like one of the last ones to get to the hotel. He said everybody was taking pictures, reaching out with microphones. Like, they were being mobbed by journalists, and it was just like a crazy, like, chaotic scene. His friends had to push the people out of the way so Gisèle could actually get into, like, the conference room area where everybody was gathered, family members and loved ones. As soon as he walked in, he's like, people were sobbing, crying, and he's like, and I don't know if you've ever seen this video, they're wailing. I mean, just absolutely distraught. It's very emotional.
Yeah.
And Gisèle was asked to come in. He was asked to sit down by one of the Malaysian Airlines representatives. And so Gisèle was like, what are we doing? And they answered, we're waiting. He said, I can't stay here. He asked one of his friends to take him home. He's like, if this is the case, I'll watch it on the news.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stay in this. And plus, he was a French citizen. Obviously, like, the universal language is English, but especially in airlines, if they may first speak their native language, but they always follow up. I don't know, flying internationally, you always hear it in English as well. But he was French, didn't speak Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
He had no way to communicate with others that were in the room. He's like, just take me home.
Yeah.
The longer the time went on, the more frustrated the family and friends of the lost loved ones got. Wolf Blitzer, he reported that they heard some of the families were trying to contact their loved ones on board. I would be doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't get a hold of them. My mom always answers my phone. Like, she always answers my call. Like,
I would be redialing every minute. I would just, Yeah,
you would think if it was crashed, the phone going right to voicemail, like if a phone's turned off, you would think, even if it's mid-flight, you would, please turn off your cell phones.
Right.
You can't make a connection.
Right.
None of the calls that were attempted to reach the passengers who were on the plane went to voicemail. They continued to ring and ring and ring.
Oh, that's spooky. That's freaky.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, crazy, one of the family members, she was a daughter, her father was on the flight, she got an incoming call from Papa, and she freaked out. She's like, what do I do? And she was like, answer it!
Yeah.
Answer it! By the time she went to answer it, it stopped ringing.
Holy crap.
I think that was the only one, and I could be wrong, but I think that was the only one that I saw, at least, that had a call from the plane to them.
Right. From someone on the plane to them. That's freaky. That is just freaky.
Well, many of the families continued to try to contact their loved ones, and it just rang and rang and rang. Being the fact that they was ringing, it meant something. There was some sort of connection that was being made. So they go to the government and are like, do something.
Yeah.
Trace the call.
Yeah. What?
We're calling them. These are their numbers. The Chinese government said they didn't have the technology to trace the calls. I call bullshit.
Yes. Yes. No.
Bullshit.
Fuck.
You didn't want to release the fact that you had that capability to the general public.
Right.
I don't know. It was just bullshit. They could have done it.
Yes. And also, when you have an incoming call, isn't there a tower that is, like, receiving that data, sending it to your phone? Like, so that tower would be within, I guess, the border of China? Is that what you're saying? And they didn't want to release that information?
I'm not too sure. So where the plane disappeared was in the southern China Sea, where it went off radar.
Okay.
Leaving the I can't say peninsula. Peninsula. Spit it out. Leaving the Malaysian peninsula.
Okay.
And going over to Vietnam, where Vietnam kind of comes together. So in between those two peninsulas,
right,
is where they went off radar. So there's no, like, in China, of course, is north of Vietnam.
Right.
But they were flying over Vietnam in order to get to Beijing. So they had to go through, obviously, Vietnamese airspace.
Okay.
Which is why they had to contact Vietnamese air traffic control to say, we're coming into your airspace, essentially. Non-hostile. Don't shoot us down.
Something shady is going on. I don't know.
Okay. 24 hours go by since last contact. All hands were on deck from many of the countries in conducting the search. If it had landed at an airport by now, they would have known it. It definitely did not have enough fuel to still be in the air 24 hours after last contact. And the oil that was spotted in the ocean, a sample of it was taken and tested. They did expect for it to be jet fuel, but it turned out it was oil from a ship.
Oh.
So it wasn't from the plane. The head of civil aviation, Rahman, he said they still had nothing 24 hours later, and things just were not going as expected. There was such a tremendous interest from around the world, to include a pretty notable print, online, and television journalist. His name is Jeff Wise. He specializes in aviation adventure psychology. He made a number of appearances on Fox, CNN, and he actually lives in New York City. He was also seen in the Netflix series and spent countless hours investigating what could have happened to the airplane. Wise first started with the communications. Why were the communications lost? What happened? A major commercial airliner like MH370 is in communication in multiple ways with the outside world. All of them went dark at the exact same time.
Yeah.
It's like somebody turned a switch.
Yeah.
The most obvious answer would have been to, like, a catastrophic failure. Did it blow up? Did it crash into the ocean? Did it suffer a fire so intense that all of the equipment was destroyed simultaneously and didn't have a chance to call for Mayday? The plane's debris at this point was still not found, where the disruption in the communication had occurred, where it disappeared. If it was not a catastrophic failure, what else could it be? The only other possibility was that someone on board the plane deliberately turned off the electronic equipment. If that's the case, who done it?
Yeah.
2 days after last contact, we're at 48 hours later, Malaysian Airlines issued a statement saying the MH370 was hundreds of miles off course and flying in the wrong direction when it was last tracked. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Now it's coming back to me. Okay, it's coming back to me now.
It's all coming back.
Which they didn't find that out till, like you said, 2 days later. 2 days? No, how
they didn't release that they found out until 2 days later. Aha.
Yeah.
It apparently turned in the opposite direction and was headed back towards the Malacca Strait over the Malaysian peninsula. It may have very well been flying for an hour before disappearing off of military radar, which last made contact at 2:22 a.m. So basically, the military radar, it doesn't require signals to be sent from the plane. However, the Malaysian military couldn't confirm 100% that it was in fact MH370, because on their radar system, they can only see that something there. They can't tell what kind of aircraft it is. They can't tell the altitude, the airspeed.
Okay,
they just know that something is there.
Okay.
So 1:20 a.m., civilian radar goes dark. 2:20 a.m., it goes dark off of the military radar. I'll kind of get to that a little bit. But countries were actually reluctant to release this information of what their military radar capabilities are because of the sensitivity of it and not wanting the people in the public to know. Vietnam's Deputy Minister of Transport, Pham Q Tu, sorry, butchered it, he stated that Vietnam had noticed MH370 turning back towards the west and that its operators had twice informed Malaysian authorities on the same day, March 8th.
Oh.
And that morning.
Okay.
Twice, Vietnam contacted Malaysia and said, your plane's not in our airspace. It's not going where it's supposed to go. It's going back your way.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Now, what it looks like is MH370 disappeared from civilian radar at 1:20, made a near U-turn to go back over the Malaysian peninsula, and it was picked up by military radar. It flew to the edge of military radar capability, which is where it dropped off at 2:22 a.m., and then vanished again. If that was the case, what was the pilot, or whoever was flying the plane, trying to do? Why make a complete U-turn?
Yeah.
Like, pulling up the emergency brake and flipping a bitch.
Something was happening. Something was...
Yes.
And it wasn't catastrophic.
Without a doubt.
Catastrophic at first. It was a U-turn. Like, why did they make a U-turn? It was an explosion. Yeah, that's a shade. Okay. All right. I'm into it.
Okay. All right. So, CNN, BBC, other major news outlets aired the story continuously on a loop. And Jassane Ouatteros, the French citizen, all he could do was watch. He decided at this point, 2 days later, I need to call my son. He's a student in France, and I need to tell him. Before he could say anything, his son answered the phone and said, tell me they weren't on that plane.
Oh my God, you're breaking my heart.
Yes.
He just broke my
And
heart.
Jasane said he heard his son scream.
You broke my heart. Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry.
That's terrible. Oh, this poor man.
He comes up later. And I'm so interested to hear what you have to say
Oh,
about
okay.
it.
Oh, okay.
March 11th, 3 days since last contact. 40 ships and 39 aircraft who were doing the search had failed to find any sign of MH370, searching simultaneously both in the South China Sea and then in the Andaman Sea to the west, which was on the other side of the Malaysian peninsula. After identifying the fact that they had made that U-turn, they were searching both the sea between Malaysia and Vietnam and the sea to the west of Malaysian peninsula, which is the Andaman Sea.
Okay.
In a press conference, Rahman, he was the civil aviator, the boss or whatever, he said, quote, "As far as we're concerned, we are equally puzzled as well," end quote, referring to the state of confusion as to which area they should be searching. You know, if you have 100 assets and you have 2 different areas to search,
right?
You have 50 assets in one area, 50 assets in another area. Are you spread too thin? Like, if we don't know where they are, somebody from the oil rig said there was an explosion. They saw one in the South China Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to follow up on that. Like,
yeah.
Was there an explosion? And then, knowing the military radar, seeing that the plane had in fact done a U-turn, was it in the Andaman Sea? So they had different areas that they were searching. So families like Intan Othman, her husband was the one that was the crew member, the flight attendant on board. She said they were absolutely confused. One day they said one thing, the next day it was something else. And it just made it hard to find out like who to believe or what to believe. And then all of the suspicions started to rise. Was the Malaysian government withholding information? The biggest part about this was why the Malaysian government held onto the information for 2 days when it changed direction. They would have been able to see it in real time. Why not release that? Was that part of their, like, wanting to not release the fact that they did see it? Like, why wouldn't they say that? Why would you spend so many resources in the South China Sea if you know it's not there?
Cover up.
Meanwhile, in the conference room of the hotel, family members started to throw water bottles at government officials. They were yelling, they were screaming, like frustration was just like absolutely building. It was busting at the seams. And they demanded answers. It created so much confusion with the family members and not knowing. I mean, that's the freaking worst part.
Yeah.
Not knowing what happened to them. And how can you not know what happened to them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, March 12th, 4 days since last contact. The search was both unbelievable and unprecedented in the times. Like in 2014, like no other search had ever been done like this. It was the 4th day and they didn't have a single sign of a massive airliner. It just gets stranger and stranger and weirder and weirder. So Jeff Wise, the journalist, he continued to look into the technical aspects of the disappearance, the communication system, like why did it fail, and was running information on his blog. He was getting a lot of comments, and a lot of them were started going back and forth and having conversations, and then he got a comment from somebody named Air Land Seaman. Oh. And from this, they kind of pulled a parallel investigation, and a group of people just decided to kind of pull out from that and create their own investigation. This Air Land Seaman had such technical details that Jeff Wise clearly felt he knew what he was talking about. And the group of people that kind of collaborated together, they are all like different types of technical experts.
Yeah.
Air Land Seaman was later identified as Mike Exner, an aviation expert who spent his entire career around engineering and science.
Okay.
He chose to start communicating on Wise's blog to see if they could all kind of come up with some sort of theories. Pilots, engineers, scientists, lawyers, all people who would be familiar with how the 777 flies and how the different systems work. They all came together and formed a tight-knit team called the Independent Group. From their findings and conversations, the spotlight turned more and more onto the pilots.
Oh, boy. Oh.
Yeah. Anyone with access to the internet could also go to a database called TomNod, basically use their platform, view these high-resolution images where MH370 went down or was last seen. Anybody could log in, and they were actually asking for help, like, help us search this area. It was such a vast area. And look at these satellite images. One of these so-called TomNodders, her name is Cindy Hendry. And she was watching the news, watching the suffering and just the anguish from these family members. And it just tugged at her heartstrings. And she's like, I have to help. Like, I have to do something. She had a hobby of photography, which meant that she kind of had an eye for detail. And she thought that she could help. Now, for the areas that they were searching, they were given an area. Like, they didn't choose a specific area. The platform of TomNod just kind of said, okay, this is the area that you're going to be looking at these images. And from when she was looking at where it first disappeared from civilian radar in the South China Sea, it was just Black Sea image after Black Sea image after Black Sea image, just the same thing over and over. Finally, she saw something white. She pulled the schematics off the internet for a Boeing 777 and said that she was able to identify this piece as the nose cone. When she started to continue to look, she started seeing more pieces.
Oh my God.
Something that looked like the fuselage, and then something that looked like part of the tail. And Hendry said that she just cried because she's like, she knew that this was part of the plane, you know, and she knew that somebody had died there, and they were no longer alive.
Yeah.
And that's not what the family members were wanting.
Yeah.
But 1 week now since last contact, so March 15th, the Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak went to Beijing and did a press conference, and he said, quote, "Today, based on satellite communication, we can confirm that MH370 did indeed turn back over the peninsular Malaysia before turning around northwest. We're ending our operations in the South China Sea and reassessing the redeployment of our assets." End quote. For the TomNodder, Cindy, she's like, oh, no. I found debris in the South China Sea. You can't stop.
Yeah.
She decided she wasn't going to sit around and not let that be known. She had already contacted TomNod and said, the debris exists. But she never got confirmation back from the platform where she tagged the debris in those images. So it was like nothing ever happened. So she went onto social media. She had screenshots, thankfully, of the things that she had flagged. She tweeted, she posted to Facebook, she emailed, and she did everything that she absolutely could to get the attention that the fact that there was debris in the South China Sea. However, the next thing that she heard was even more confusing. The Malaysian Prime Minister said, based on this new data, we have determined that the plane's last communication with the satellite was in one of two possible corridors. And I'll explain that.
Yeah.
So after the plane turned around, it did its U-turn, flew over the Malaysian peninsula.
Right.
When it left military radar, it continued on.
Okay.
It turns out that a satellite communication system called Inmarsat had equipment aboard that airplane, and the plane was communicating with the satellite. And this last ping was in the center of the Indian Ocean. The coverage area of the Inmarsat pings was so vast that it could have been hundreds of thousands of square miles.
Okay.
I'll kind of explain it. It seems kind of confusing, but the only way that a plane flying over a body of water can communicate,
right?
There's no towers, right? So they have to communicate via satellite.
Okay.
So they have to transmit to a satellite. Inmarsat provides a satellite communications for aircraft, all commercial aircraft, that go beyond the range of ground radar systems. A gentleman named Mark Dickinson from Inmarsat, he said, what Inmarsat found were 7 pings. Every hour, the Inmarsat system was checking in on the satellite terminal on the aircraft, and the aircraft was responding. So basically, Inmarsat pings and says, hey, are you there? The satellite terminal on the aircraft comes back and says, yes, I'm here. So it was confirming that.
Right.
For 7 hours.
So it was in the air.
6 hours.
That they were in the air.
After it lost contact from military radar, so 2:20 in the morning, it leaves any type of radar capability. The Inmarsat system saying, are you there? The plane is saying, yes, I'm here. These pings continued, like I mentioned, once an hour, about 6 hours, until the last ping at 8:19 a.m. The aircraft did not respond to the status request from the Inmarsat at 9:15. So, 8:19 to 9:15.
Do you think it went down between that time, or do you think, is it possible to get a ping from a plane that landed?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, does it have to be like this company, So
I think it's also built in the system. So I think it's built into the computer satellite system that says, we've identified that you're in the air.
Got it.
We'll start making sure I'm pinging you.
Okay.
Like, I think I could be wrong.
But
But
Inmarsat, like, they specialize in going a little bit further than what normal satellites do. Because we know, so at that point, we know it's in the water somewhere.
Yes.
But the Indian Sea?
The Indian Ocean. Yeah.
Indian Ocean?
Yeah.
Fuck.
The people who looked at Inmarsat, they were looking into it, they were shocked that it even pinged because it wasn't on radar. Like, it had disappeared. Like, what the heck? So they were not still expecting the aircraft to be flying. The drawback, there's nothing in the data that Inmarsat had that said where MH370 could be, like a GPS. It wasn't a GPS. It was just basically saying, poke, poke, are you alive?
Okay.
Yep, I'm alive, but I'm not, but
yeah,
you don't have my location.
Right, okay.
They only knew how far the aircraft would have been from a satellite for each ping. So this meant they had to analyze the data and identify the distance between the satellite and the ping from, the first ping to the second ping to the third ping to kind of help. So they had to sit down and analyze all of that data.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they didn't know if it was flying north or flying south. And once it's in the Indian Ocean, it kind of turns back around. It does its U-turn.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to go to the north or is it going to go to the south?
Okay.
They had this huge vast of area which they had to analyze and try to figure it out. If it went south, it would have ended up in the South Indian Ocean, middle of nowhere, no land in sight.
Okay.
If it went north, it would have gone to Central Asia.
Okay.
Now, the most optimistic option at this point was that it went north, landed in Central Asia. It would have been around Kazakhstan.
Right.
On the other hand, if it went south, it would have crashed. It would have ran out of fuel. It would have been in a remote area of the Indian Ocean. And there's no way that anybody would have survived. Now, while Inmarsat was working on analyzing the information, the Malaysian government is now forced to acknowledge that this was a deliberate act. Like, there's no way this was an accident. Somebody had to have physically turned the plane. It had to have been done intentionally. Like, there's no way the plane would have done it itself. It couldn't have been done by accident. Somebody caused that plane to turn around.
Yeah.
Somebody caused that plane to lose its communications.
I agree. Yeah.
Now, as suspicions grew, the Malaysian Prime Minister did confirm that that it was deliberately taken off course, and it was now a criminal investigation. One of the two pilots was considered infinitely more of a culprit than the other.
Okay.
The co-pilot was just approved to fly this Boeing 777. It was its very first flight as a first officer for Malaysian Airlines on this type of aircraft. He was quite new. The other one, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, was the focus, but we're going to get into him a little bit more later.
Oh, okay.
Still no sign of the plane. Was it north? Did it go south? Inmarsat had to essentially reverse engineer their system to crack the code to find out what would be expected if the aircraft was moving north or if it was moving south, and then they found it. They had to decipher what they actually could release to the Malaysian government before they could give them the information. But March 24, 16 days after last contact, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak appeared before the media, 10 p.m. local time, and gave a statement that Flight 370, which he announced he was briefed by the Air Accidents Investigations Branch in the UK and by Inmarsat, and they concluded that MH370's last position before it disappeared was the southern corridor. The remote location, no landing sites possible, and concluding, and he said this, the flight had ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Wow.
Based on the Inmarsat data. But there was no proof.
Right.
There was no physical evidence, only satellite information, and the Malaysian government told people that their loved ones were dead because of math. And never before in history did 239 people ever be declared dead based on mathematics alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the families were like, prove it. There was no verification because they're like, oh, this is where it is. There's no possible way we can find it.
Right.
Closed case. And the families felt that they were hiding information. The Malaysian government was hiding information. We're just trying to wrap it up and be done with it. The families of the majority of the passengers, Chinese, right, nationality, they started to openly protest, which is not a thing that you do in China. Mm-hmm. They condemned the Malaysian government, and they told the Malaysian government that the Malaysian government, the Malaysian military, and Malaysia Airlines were all accountable for these quote-unquote unforgivable crimes. Riots ensued in Beijing, and as families of the Chinese passengers lost, they started to protest outside the Malaysian embassy, and they were holding signs and shouting things like, "Tell us the truth. Malaysia is a liar. Bring our families back. You are murderers."
Wow.
They simply refused to accept the fact that their loved ones were lost without the proof.
Yeah. Oh,
I could see
hard.
that. I mean, I could see how emotional, show me evidence that there's something.
Yes, of course. You want closure or something like that. Malaysia.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So search and rescue efforts then were moved from around the Malaysian Peninsula down to the southern Indian Ocean.
Okay. This story is getting me very upset. I got my fan out.
You're like,
I'm very upset right now because I'm like, what the fuck, Malaysia?
So search and rescue efforts then were moved from the Malaysian Peninsula area down to the southern Indian Ocean. Between March 18th and April 28th, There were 19 vessels, 345 sorties by military aircraft that searched 1.8 million square miles.
That's a big freaking area.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The final phase of the search was a bathymetric survey and sonar search of the seafloor, 1,100 miles southwest of Perth, Western Australia. Starting from March 30th, 2014, the search was coordinated by Joint Agency Coordination Center. It's an Australian government agency established specifically to manage the effort to locate and recover anything from Flight 370, and it primarily involved Australian, Malaysian, and Chinese governments. So that search is going. They're doing the sonar searching, trying to get anything that might have sunk to the ocean floor. 4.5 months later, as the search is still continuing, July 7th, 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight MH17 took off from Amsterdam and was shot down by a surface-to-air missile over Ukraine. It was confirmed that the Russian military intelligence had commanded a Russian army unit to shoot the plane down. And the Ukrainian president called it an act of terrorism. Do you remember that at all?
Yes,
yeah.
I do. Oh my God.
Now,
okay.
Malaysian Airlines had not had a significant incident since the 90s. And now in a span of a few months, it lost 2 Boeing 777s. And people started to think, okay, is this a coincidence? Is there a connection?
Yeah.
Is the loss of MH370 potentially an act of war? MH17 had nearly 300 people on board.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was actually considered, loss-wise, was more than it was on MH370. But did the Russians actually cause both events? The search of MH370 lasted until January 17th of 2017, so almost 3 years. It cost $155 million, where the underwater search accounted for 86% of that. In an October 2017 report by the Australian Transportation Safety Bureau, they concluded that the location where the aircraft went down had been narrowed to an area of 9,700 square miles, which is better than hundreds of thousands of square miles. But they used this by satellite images and what they call a debris drift analysis. So based on waves, current, the how it was moved, wind, where would this likely float to? Now, several pieces of marine debris were found on the coast of Africa, on the Indian Ocean Islands off of the coast of Africa, the first of which was discovered July 29th, 2015, on an island called Reunion. It's in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and this was confirmed to have been pieces of Flight MH370. The bulk of the aircraft has not been located, prompting many, many, many theories about its disappearance. And this is where we're going to end part 1 of the mysterious MH370 disappearance.
Oh boy. Yay. I didn't even think about the Russian aspect. Like I totally missed that.
Yeah.
That's good. Is that a nuggie? Is that another nuggie?
It's another nuggie. So next, I love Nuggie. I'm going to get Nuggie. I'm going to put a pilot's hat on him.
Yes.
A little pilot's cap. And he's going to fly us into next week.
And get Squishy and put him on the other side with like a red scarf. Like he's
it's like a flight attendant.
Right.
Yeah. So is Squishy the attendant? And he's the pilot serving? I'm thinking, male pilot, female flight attendant, do a little nookie.
Is it? Wait. Did we establish that Squishy, is it a boy or a girl?
Well, I don't know. It can be anything it wants to be.
That's true. They still have this little romance. Okay. All right. Well, this is good because now I got questions. I got a lot of questions.
I have questions.
I'm going to write my questions down because I need them answered because this is...
Yeah.
I forgot how fucking... First of all, I forgot that there were 2 planes that went down, which is hella suspicious. And then forgot that I forgot the whole Russian aspect to it.
So we've got a couple theories kind of, sprinkled. We've got an act of war, essentially. Hijacking, potentially. Russian involvement. We've got... I don't know, one of the pilots decided to do a mass murder-suicide mission for some reason. Somebody else on the plane went nuts, berserk, decided to take it over. What if, the pilot passed out, hit one of the buttons, turned the plane around, and it just went until it ran out of fuel?
Are we going to cover that in the next one?
We're going to talk about a lot of theories in the next one.
Okay. All right. This is good.
And I'll talk about some of the details and stuff in the next one too. Like, I'll mention some of the additional things about like the debris, where the debris was found, and what the debris was. And then we'll talk about some of the other theories.
Okay. Well,
chatters, what do you think?
Yeah. Hey there, chatters. I'm Nat.
And I'm Kat, and welcome to the Crime Chat. I am your forensic femme fatale, Natalie, is your true crime addict connoisseur.
We're just two normal girls who obsess about dark crimes, evil minds, and occasionally the unknown.
Here's your disclaimer, chatters. The following Crime Chat contains adult content and descriptions of, interesting. We're going to follow up part 2. So kind of violent, mysterious, just kind of very ugly scenarios today. We'll just go with ugly. So your listener discretion is advised.
Okay, well, before we get into all that, Kat, what have you done? We've had a holiday so far.
We did. So I was on my Thanksgiving cruise, and by the time this comes out, I'll be home for weeks. But This is the first time that we've caught up since I've been back, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Didn't see any sharks on my dive. Fuck.
No?
No.
But there was turkey, right? You had turkey dinner.
Yes.
The ship had all that good stuff, all the jazz.
All the fixins. It was amazing. There's and I missed it. They had a turkey carving. Thanksgiving Day, we were in Roatan, Honduras, and that was our dive day. So we were getting everything all ready, and we went down to the 5th deck or whatever, kind of waiting to get cleared so we can go ashore.
Right.
And we had just missed the turkey carving. I was like, oh. But they had like an ice carving out of a turkey. It was decorated. It was done very, very nice.
Oh, nice. Very nice. That's got to be cool. Everything done for you. No cleanup. No mess.
But I will tell you.
What?
Okay. We'll probably never do a big holiday cruise again.
Why? What happened?
The fucking kids. I love kids. Oh, yeah. I love my children. I love my granddaughter.
It depends whose kids we're talking about, yeah. Yeah.
But they were just running all over the place, and we didn't even think about it. Like, the kids were going to be out of school, right? And families were getting together to do something while kids were home from college or what on break or whatever. Like it was just hectic.
Yeah,
like on the ship. You know what I mean? So we stayed mostly in the adult only area. And I can't tell every day that we were out there because they had their own pool. There was their own bar. We just played card games and, just kind of hung out and stuff. And we stayed in the back of the ship, more further back in the aft than we normally would. And the bar was just a couple of decks above. So we'd literally go straight up. When we go to dinner, we'd go straight down. So it was really convenient, kind of where we ended up being. So we would and it's the kids kept getting kicked out of the pool. There's a sign literally that says adults only. This is an adult only section. And they were having people to come and kick them out and stuff. But the thing is too, is the kids area, the teen and kids area was a deck above. So they were just coming down going, ooh, there's an open pool. Nobody's hardly in it. I'm going to go do a cannonball.
They're doing the kids being kids.
They're kids being kids.
But there are cruises that are adults only, so you don't have to.
Yeah. And that's what we like about Princess Cruises is typically it's an older crowd, not too many kids. It's just it's more relaxing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You still can get a little party scene. You can still have some fun.
Yeah.
But it's not. And let me tell you something. Watching a 60-year-old get out there and do the Macarena or the what's that song? The Wobble?
What's the Wobble?
It's hilarious.
What's the Wobble? Never heard of that. Electric Slide? No.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got some of the older stuff, but now I can't think of them. Slide to the left.
Oh,
to the right, crisscross. That's not the Wobble, but the Wobble is it's a booty dance. And my girlfriend who was on the cruise with us, the one that lives in Florida, her husband showed me how to do it because anytime that song came on, he was
yeah.
He literally beeline for the dance.
Really?
It was fun. Yeah. That was his dance song. Shout out to Jake.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that whole dance routine, the wobble or whatever you're gonna call it.
Yeah.
It was in Florida. It's not known where it was. In New York, we didn't know anything. We barely knew the Macarena. I would say I was at a club at one point when it first came out, and everybody in the club was doing the Macarena. Okay. Other than that,
the very first time I heard and learned the Macarena, I was on a cruise ship.
Were you?
Yep. But anyway, so we're back. Got all Christmas done.
Nuts.
I'm done. Like, decorations, check.
Really?
Gifts, check. Broke, check. Yes. And I've never done this early. And even by the time this episode comes out, it'd still be kind of early. But I'm like done soups early.
Really?
And yeah, it was like, well, I mean, why not?
Oh my God. I'm just not, I guess, it's hard right now for me because I'm kind of functioning between 3 different residences.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's like I have the bulk of my life, like clothing and stuff, in my condo.
Yeah.
And then I have the second part of the bulk and like the stuff that you go through every day in the house that I'm living in now. And then in the new house, so I had Thanksgiving in the new house.
I was just gonna ask you, did you have it in the new house? How did it go?
It was good.
Good.
But it's very hard organizing a Thanksgiving meal and you're not technically in your kitchen. Like you're in an away kitchen. So everything was fine. But yeah, it's like I had to sit there and say, this spoon, do I have an extra spoon in the new house? Like, shit like that you would never think that you just think you have. And so. Yeah. But.
Well, what else? I mean, you had a good Thanksgiving
Yes.
and all, other than juggling and everything like that.
Yeah. It's been, other than that, we're going to do Christmas Eve at the new house. I am not going to cook like a crazy person. Good. After this Thanksgiving, when I said I didn't do it for 4 years and I'm like, do I miss it? Do I not? I don't know. Let me try it. No, I don't miss it. I don't miss it
You're like, there's
at
a reason
all.
I haven't.
Right. So at this point, like I've told everybody, if I have a Thanksgiving, it is going to be a potluck. Like I'll do the turkey. Yeah. You're bringing a side. Yeah. I'm not doing all the sides. You bring something, and then we'll do with that. We're all adults. Not like we have a bunch of kids running around, But so I don't know.
Yeah. Have you watched anything? Have you done anything else?
I went shopping today. I did try to go Christmas shopping, but. Like always, normally I get there, I'm like, oh my God, I like that. And I ended up shopping for myself, but.
You went Christmas shopping.
Yeah, I went Christmas shopping. Yeah. Other than that, like this is also a busy time for work because the company that I work with, they do a lot of charity work during this time. So my time is like tomorrow, the next day. Tomorrow we're planning Christmas party. And then we have our company Christmas party, and then we have our party that we fund. It's just for the community, and it's just...
Wait, didn't you get sick last time after Christmas?
I was deathly sick last Christmas.
Yeah.
I could not leave my place. I had I went from COVID to pneumonia. I know. It took me months to recover. Oh, yeah, so...
Take care of yourself.
I'm trying...
Protect yourself.
Yeah. And I got sick from my company party.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be wearing a mask. It's not happening again. Not happening again.
No. And strangely enough, the last several times I've gotten back from any vacation, mostly a cruise, I've gotten either the flu or COVID. I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
So now I am looking behind you. That's adorable.
We got Squishy and Nuggy.
Yeah.
And they're got a CrimeChat reading. Their podcast is down in the little reading file in business class of a Boeing 777.
They got double leg room for 2 things that do not have legs. Well, Squishy's got a couple of tentacles, but they're short. Where are they heading to? Hopefully they'll get there.
Anywhere they want. They're heading to Dreamland. But I thought, we had the cockpit last time, and then we talked about putting Squishy and Nuggy in there. So we got them. They're riding so in the plane behind me on the screen.
That is so cute. Oh, my God. Oh, wait a minute. So where's the scary clown?
Oh, I did not get him.
He's the pilot.
He's a pilot. Who knows if the
plane's going to land.
Reach its destination then.
All right. Well, I can't wait to get into part 2 of this. I really can't.
Yes. So we're going to just jump right in.
Okay.
This is going to be a little bit of a longer part. I know where I ended it, it just made sense last week. But today we're going to talk more about the theories and what some people believe and why they believe those theories. Chatters, you let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. So today we're going to go over the second half of the 2-part series, We're covering one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Probably the greatest mystery in aviation history, to be honest. 239 lives were presumably lost when Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 disappeared off of radar, lost all communications around 1:20 a.m. on March 8, 2014. The search for the missing plane would be the most expensive search in aviation history. Partly, in fact, because they didn't know where to look. We talked about that a little bit last week.
Yeah.
The plane not only disappeared off radar, but it was also off course. Initially started searching in the South China Sea, then where its last location was. And then they moved to the Andaman Sea, and then the vast southern Indian Ocean. The plane was so off course that authorities had to consider the fact that this was a deliberate act. 4.5 months after MH370, on July 17, 2014, we kind of talked about this last week too, Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 took off from Amsterdam and was shot down by a surface-to-air missile over Ukraine, just over the Russian border. It was confirmed that Russian military intelligence commanded a Russian army unit to shoot the plane down. The Ukrainian president called it an act of terrorism. And MH370 is now potentially maybe an act of war if we now have two planes potentially with Russian involvement.
Yeah.
Malaysian Airlines hadn't had a significant incident since the 1990s, and now within a span of a few months lost two huge aircraft. They were identical, by the way, both Boeing 777s. And on the MH17, there was nearly 300 people on board. Was it a coincidence? Was there a connection? And this is kind of where we picked up from last week. So, okay, we're searching. The search team is in the southern Indian Ocean right now. And this has been continuing and mostly relying on the Australian government because technically it was in Australian waters where they were searching.
Okay.
So it had a lot of Australian government and assets involved. Overall, there were 43 ships and 58 aircraft with 14 different countries all coming together to try and find clues as to what the hell happened to MH370. The area they were searching was huge, far larger than the continental United States itself. They were searching for not just a needle in a haystack, but they were trying to find where the fucking haystack even was. Now, according to search teams, it was a very difficult area to search. You could hope for, like a nice, flat, soft plain, but there were underwater volcanoes. There were mountains that were larger and wider than the Grand Canyon, all underwater. And the weather was appalling. Waves reached 24 meters or up to 72 feet.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
Grief.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of the video of, with the search teams and stuff out there. And it's just insane. That shit's scary. Okay, 1 year later, they're still looking for the plane. Malaysian authorities took the brunt of the blame and perhaps even being listed as incompetent in inability to answer anybody's questions about where the plane was and what happened to it. So this is still continuing for a year. Theories by this point were bouncing left and right. Speculation was rampant. Hijacking, an insurance scam, a meteorite hitting it, aliens. Korean officials took over the plane. The only clue that they had was the Inmarsat data that concluded it ended in the southern Indian Ocean. So just a reminder from last week, Inmarsat is a satellite system where it had equipment on board that was pinging to a satellite once an hour. And the only thing that this equipment did was to say, hey, airplane, are you still there? Ping, right. Yes, I'm still here. And it did that for 6 hours. So the 8 a.m. ping was the last one, and essentially that's also when it would have been estimated to run out of fuel. The 9 a.m. ping, nothing. So Le Monde is a French daily newspaper, and this newspaper decided to revisit the story, acknowledging the 1 year point since the plane went missing. The fact that nothing was tangible, nothing was credible, had been found to this point. And if you remember last week, the captain was essentially made the villain in the story.
Yeah.
Investigative journalist, her name is Florence DeChaney. She specialized in Asia-Pacific area for about 30 years, so she's very knowledgeable of this area. And she personally wanted to get some of her own understanding about Captain Zahiri and kind of who he was. So the first theory is the pilot did it. Zahiri was extremely experienced. He had been doing it for many, many years. He had a great reputation. It was very evident, too, that what was done not only was deliberate, but it was aggressive and it was sophisticated. Malaysian police raided Zahiri's home and removed a home flight simulator to see if by chance he had done the same route, like the erratic route had been done on a simulator, to kind of practice it first before actually doing it to see if it was rehearsed. Now, amongst the fog of unanswered questions, the clarity of who controlled the plane lied in Jeff Wise's theory, the pilot. Jeff Wise, if you remember, he was a New York Times kind of contributor. He's a journalist specializing in aviation, adventure, psychology, both print and online. He's been in the news. He was kind of listed as like a guest in a lot of the news coverage for the story. Now, he decided he needed to figure out if it was a mass murder-suicide, and if it was, the type of planning that went into it. He had to paint this picture, basically, of what happened that night and how he put it all together. This is his theory. So shortly after 1 a.m., Zahiri is flying over the South China Sea, making their way to Beijing, routine red-eye flight. At this stage, MH370, if you remember, are being handed over from Malaysian air traffic control and airspace to Vietnam.
Right. Yeah.
So there's kind of that gray area in between. It's a gray zone, is actually what he called it, between the two areas of air traffic control. So maybe, Jeff Wise said, maybe he asked the co-pilot to go to the back and get something. Or, hey, can you go check on this or that for me? Co-pilot closes the door, Zahiri locks it. He implements his plan. Turns off all the electronics that make the plane visible to the outside world, and it vanishes from radar. And at that moment, everyone else on the plane has no idea. They just think everything's routine, passengers are doing their thing, going to sleep, the flight attendants are serving drinks or doing whatever. But then, maybe co-pilot comes back and realizes that he's locked out of the cockpit. So now Zahir probably will have a hard time keeping control of the plane. Maybe he started to depressurize the cabin, and the oxygen masks drop. Passengers are confused, don't know what's going on. Most people don't know this, but the oxygen masks only last about 15 minutes.
With air?
In an airplane.
Really?
Most people don't realize that. But the captain and the pilot, theirs actually last much longer. They have a more sophisticated oxygen supply. So soon, the entire cabin's quiet. Zahiri turns the plane around to the south, flies straight into the darkness, waiting for his fuel light to run out. And after about 6 hours of flight, the engine stops. He pushes the nose down, sends the plane into a dive, and MH370 is gone. Now, if this theory is true, Jeff stated that this actually had to be the sequence of events necessary for Zahiri to be in complete control of the plane. There have been a handful of cases where pilots have decided to, do mass murder-suicide and kill all their passengers, but not a case that had taken 6 hours to complete a mass murder-suicide. So maybe it wasn't Zahiri. Maybe this wasn't the thing. The French journalist Florence Duchesne, she found that as people were looking into him, the pilot, Captain Zahiri, there was a very consistent and hostile campaign against him, looking into his private life, looking into his mental health. There were also accusations that he might have had some political motivations to disappear the plane. He was a fan of a gentleman named Anwar Ibrahim, who was a leader of the opposition party from Malaysia. And he attended Anwar's pro-democracy rallies and meetings. People were asking, did he purposely take down the plane to make a political statement? However, while it's possible, there was no message whatsoever left. Not a political note, not a suicide note, nothing to his family. So the more Florence looked into Zahiri, the less she found to actually substantiate this claim. Zahiri had a YouTube channel also. He put up self-help videos online, like how to seal your windows, how to fit your air conditioner. And in her opinion, from all the research that she did, he was not an extremist. Next, what Florence did was line up interviews with Zahiri's family. So she went and talked to his older sister, and she described him as a gentle, caring person. And the sister was obviously upset at the loss not only of her brother, but also distraught because she had to endure all this insinuations that Zahiri was responsible for the disaster.
Right.
Now, if you also remember in part 1, Intan Othman, she was the wife of one of the crew members on board, who was also a Malaysian Airlines flight attendant, but she hadn't been flying because she was pregnant at that time, so she wasn't working. She said that Captain Zahiri was known as one of the best pilots, and many Malaysian Airlines employees don't agree with these accusations. Crisis Director Sharjui also knew Captain Zahiri, and he was very offended personally by the accusations, and he said Zahiri was the utmost professional. There was no way that he could have done this. And even though, like, we hear that sometimes, like, people, you never really know what's going on with somebody.
Right. Yeah.
But as far as Florence was concerned, based on all of the information she gathered, she basically said Zahiri wasn't guilty. It was like false accusation. And people, I think, too, at this point, just wanted someone to blame.
Yeah.
A year later, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Up until this point, search is still continuing, solely based on the Inmarsat data. That is the only evidence that they have. That's it. It's just where the Inmarsat data likely led them to based on math and analytics.
They had no plane. They have nothing.
They have nothing.
It's crazy.
At this point. Now, the Malaysian government actually would not release the Inmarsat data in full until about a year later. They actually did. So inside the report was a paragraph that said the Inmarsat piece of equipment that controlled the communications with the satellite had been turned off when all the other communications had been turned off, but then it was turned back on. Not only did they lose all the communications, but this had to have been requested to be turned back on from inside MH370.
Right.
As all other communications are off. Super weird.
Yeah.
So to Jeff Wise, this changed everything. If you wanted to turn a system off and make the plane disappear, why would you want to turn it back on again? Any part of the equipment. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was something wrong with the Inmarsat data. Maybe it was tampered with. It's possible. Most airline pilots are not actually trained to manipulate the equipment, and airlines don't want them to do it. Like, they don't want them to know how to do it.
Right.
There's no on-off switch in the cockpit. The 777 uses electronics for everything, and all of that lies in the electronics bay of the plane. In there, you can turn off the system. That's the only way you can turn it off. There's no control in the cockpit or anything. You have to go down into the electronics bay to actually turn it off. So how do you access it? Anybody can. It's crazy.
Okay.
There's an unlocked hatch under a piece of carpet near the front of first class cabin, right here.
Right.
Right in front of those seats.
Right.
That anyone could actually pull up the carpet, lift up the electronics bay hatch, and go down in the electronics bay.
So you don't have to be in the cockpit. You can just be a passenger who knows exactly where that is. Mm-hmm. And maybe working with a hijacker that's doing their thing, and then your partner goes down, does all this, maybe on his way out, kicks the switch back on.
Maybe you're onto something.
Okay, skishy.
So
maybe it was skishy.
They're conspirators right here behind me. So maybe it wasn't the pilot after all. Maybe somebody else manipulated it. But this is also another point that I found freaking weird, okay? While they're figuring out the electronics bay shenanigans, someone only identified as Mr. B had connections to Secret Services and reached out to the French citizen Ghislaine Waterlos. Remember, his family, his wife and his two kids were on board.
That poor guy.
He was a French citizen that was actually in Beijing for work. His family was coming to visit him in Beijing. When Ghislaine and Mr. B first met, the very first thing that Mr. B told him was the Americans knew full well what happened. There were 2 American AWACS monitoring the area at the time that the plane disappeared. Now, you give me the look. I'm going to tell you what an AWACS is.
Yeah.
An AWACS is an airborne warning and control system. It's part of a Boeing E-3 Sentry aircraft derived from the Boeing 707 frame airliner. Mm-hmm. It provides all-weather surveillance, command control, communication systems, and you've seen it before. I guarantee it. It's distinct by the rotator, the dome. It's called a rotodome on top of the fuselage. Yes.
Yes, I've seen that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's an airborne warning and control system. It's called AWACS. Now, Mr. B said these 2 planes must have perfectly tracked MH370 regardless of its state at any point in time, so they knew exactly where it crashed. They know where it is. And just saying, not only was he in disbelief that the Americans would be involved, but he also had a feeling that he and other families were being lied to by the Malaysian government, and he just absolutely had to do something. So he accepted every interview that he could to say that they were being lied to, they needed help from journalists to find the truth. And he started coordinating with other family members of the lost loved ones. They were coming together to conduct their own investigation, try to get answers. And since no information was coming from Malaysia, like, they knew that this was risky because they are a group of essentially citizens going up against the government. So the families pushed for charges to include an act of terrorism against the Malaysian government. Simply because it was the highest level of charges that you could get for judicial matters. And this is, and so Ghislaine actually filed for these charges in France. He and his lawyer felt that they owed it to everyone who lost somebody, especially those who don't have the ability that they do in France. So in France, when you press charges, judges are automatically assigned, and they have to investigate.
Yeah.
There's no time frame on it.
Yeah.
They have to find out. They just want the truth, right? So French journalist Florine Duchesne, she also wants to hear what Ghislaine has to say. And so they met, and he told her that he had been approached by a senior member of the intelligence service, Mr. B, who told him that Americans knew exactly what happened, and that the two AWACS were also involved. Now, Florence met with Mr. B herself, and she felt that he was a credible source and a genuine member of the intelligence community, like he'd been vetted or verified, essentially. And this was just another voice to Florence saying that the truth of actually what happened to MH370 was completely different than the official narrative that the Malaysian government was spitting out.
Oh boy.
So even though the French were saying that the Americans were involved, after the events of the shot down MH17 by the Russians, Jeff Wise was then thinking maybe the Russians are involved. So theory number 2. Hijacking. You were on it. Inmarsat also originally theorized that the plane, if you remember, the plane could have gone north or south. The military radar caught the plane doing a complete U-turn, going back over the Malaysian peninsula. The Inmarsat data on its pings, they couldn't tell until it was fully analyzed if it went up north into like Central Asia or if it went down into the Indian Ocean.
Right.
After the analysis, they were saying, of course, that it went to Southern Indian Ocean. So, what if somebody aboard the plane who was sophisticated enough to change the Inmarsat data and make it look like it went south when in fact it actually went north? It turns out that on Boeing airplanes, it is physically possible for the data to be manipulated. Maybe this is an alternate explanation. So if the plane went north, based on the final Inmarsat ping, it would have ended up in Kazakhstan, a poor country, Central Asia, not necessarily capable of a sophisticated hacking attack, but Kazakhstan is a client state of Russia. Jeff Wise also concluded that his prime suspect was that the same intelligence services who were responsible for shooting down the MH17 in Ukraine were also involved with this MH370 disappearance, potentially linking the two incidents. Now, if you look into this theory and compare it with the manifest, there were 3 Russians on board the plane. In fact, comparing it to the seating diagram, like, he did all this work. This is not this is all his work. One of them was sitting about 15 feet away from the unlocked hatch of the electronics bay. It's super easy to get to, like, access-wise, right? This is his scenario. This is basically saying, if this theory is possible, this is what had to have happened. So here it is.
Okay.
February 28th, 2014, 8 days before MH370's disappearance, Russian troops landed in Crimea and carried out an armed invasion. When MH370 happened, it took the media attention off of the invasion and onto the disappearance. Now, in essence, a reverse information warfare campaign, and Russia was being condemned internationally by this invasion. MH370 was the perfect distraction.
Yeah, I believe that completely. I totally believe that. And you know something? I also believe that America could have known where the plane was, but how can we get involved? Like, also, you're expecting Americans to get involved in possibly a situation that could have been created a bigger situation. Like, I love how people are like, oh, the Americans knew. Maybe we knew, but we couldn't do anything about it.
We are involved, but that's coming later.
Oh, okay. All right.
So if this actually happened, if Russia used this as a reverse information warfare campaign, take the eyes off the prize, nothing to see here, this is the scenario that should have happened on March 8th. 1:15 a.m., Zahiri's flying over the South China Sea. Dark, cool, calm night. Passengers are tired, anticipating an overnight flight. You know, it's a red eye. Give me a couple glasses of wine. Let me put my mask on. I'm out.
Right.
The 3 Russians aboard begin their operation. Somewhere over the South China Sea, someone is making a ruckus, like there's some sort of distraction up in first class or maybe towards the back of the plane. And the flight attendants go to see what's going on.
Nuggie got drunk.
As this happens.
Yeah. Nuggie got drunk.
Or the one I told you about the guy when I was flying to Kuwait where he puked all over himself.
Yes. Oh, God, the crowd. Nuggie.
That was a distraction. That would have been a perfect distraction.
Oh.
So flight attendants go, see what's going on. And as this is happening, one of the Russians, the one that's sitting in first class, slips forward, opens up the carpet, goes into the electronics bay. In the hatch, there's banks of electronics, which is this is the brain of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
This is where all the things happen. He plugs into the computer's flight systems control, and the plane moves closer to the edge of the Malaysian airspace. Now, once they get notification that, you know, we're signing off, MH370, good night, contact Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
So in that gray area, people on board still have no idea what's going on, what's happening, but inside the electronics bay, the Russian agent turns the equipment on, and the plane vanishes from radar. He now has complete control of the aircraft. None of the communication systems are working. Even more shockingly, the plane suddenly banks violently left, making that U-turn, a maneuver that neither one of the pilots would have commanded. But in the electronics bay, the Russian agent has started to depressurize the airplane, letting the air slowly out of the cabin, turns the knob of an oxygen bottle stowed in the wall, which cuts off the emergency supply for the pilot and co-pilot. So their extra supply cuts that off. The flight crew suddenly realize they can't breathe. Within minutes, everybody loses consciousness.
Wow.
The Russian agent in the electronics bay has turned the plane northwest and deliberately changed the data on the Inmarsat system. Now, if anyone looks at the trail of the digital breadcrumbs the plane is about to leave behind, they'll misinterpret the signal as meaning the plane went south, when in fact it actually went north. MH370 continues onward into the night, receding gradually from its phantom twin. I love that part. When I read it, I had to include it. Receding gradually from its phantom twin. And ultimately winding up over the central deserts of Kazakhstan. Now, for the hijackers, this is mission accomplished. Is that too far-fetched?
No.
That theory.
Yeah, I mean,
that scenario.
There's a lot there, but no, I don't think anything's too far-fetched. Prove it to me.
Right. Prove me it's not.
Right.
So Jeff Wise, like, I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this. Like, I know people are going to think I'm crazy.
From
No, just
Snow.
No. Not from Squishy.
No, okay.
Rest in peace.
They didn't go down yet. And you know what? If that plane goes down, Squishy's just going back home. The ocean.
That's right.
It's
He's
Nuggie.
going to the ocean.
Nuggie's going to get soggy.
No, that's a soggy nugget. But Jeff Wise did bring attention to this theory and got a lot of backlash. They were like, no, man, you've lost your mind. Including his own people. Now, if you remember, he was part of this group. So he started doing this blog originally. Then there was a lot of communications back and forth on the blog. And they created their own independent investigation group called the Independent Group. One of the members, his name is Mike Exner, very intimately familiar with how the plane worked and was absolutely certain the plane turned south and not north. And he was actually shocked that Jeff, who was in this group with them, would even consider this theory that the data was manipulated. So Jeff got kicked out of the independent group.
That's a bitch move, Mike. No. Okay.
Yeah. So the crisis director, Sharjuri, he confirmed that, yes, anybody can get into the hatch and disable the transponder, disable the communication system, but it is absolutely impossible to fly the aircraft from the avionics compartment.
Okay.
So with that being said, while it's impossible to fly from the electronics bay, it is possible to get inside and turn off all the electronics that make the plane visible to the outside world.
Okay.
If in fact the data was right, and it told Inmarsat where the plane was, how come they haven't fucking found it?
Exactly. As simple as that.
Then debris starts showing up. After a year, over a year, a small French territory island in the Indian Ocean called La Réunion. It's just east of Madagascar, off of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They found themselves on the map, this little island. In the world news, a piece of the plane's wing called the flaperon, the one that goes up and down.
Right.
Like for wind and stop, or, fast, slow, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was found on the rocky beach of La Réunion. It was discovered July 29th, 2015, and then transported to Toulouse, France, where it was examined by France's Civil Aviation Accident Investigation Agency. The debris was determined to be consistent with a Boeing 777. Malaysia sent their own investigators to both La Réunion and to Toulouse, and on September 3rd, 2015, a year and a half after the flight disappeared, they confirmed the serial numbers found on the internal components of the flaperon linked it, quote-unquote, with certainty to MH370. Now, this was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. This was a year and a half later, the very first, other than the Inmarsat data, evidence of something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with certainty, how can they actually be 100% that this piece
is from that plane?
It's from that plane, even though it had the same serial number.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
this was
planes,
huge news.
Don't planes they also their parts are kind of harvested out to other planes, and also
they can be.
Can it be planted?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We're gonna get into it.
Okay, give me chills.
Okay,
right.
It was huge news, especially for the independent group. And if you recall from last week, this group was made up of pilots, engineers, scientists, lawyers, people familiar with how the 777 works. And Mike Exner, the guy that said that Jeff Wise got kicked out, said, quote, "This was the first hard evidence that the plane went down in the Indian Ocean," end quote. Because what they did is they looked at how the current would have moved it.
Yeah.
The debris would have floated, and they estimated based on wind, waves, current, and they had a mathematical calculation of where debris would have shown up. So with this in mind, the debris also reinforced the theories that the independent group had been advocating, that it was in the southern Indian Ocean.
Okay.
And it also confirmed the Inmarsat data. French police then conducted a wider search. Now remember, because La Réunion is a French territory, so French police conducted a wider search of the waters around Réunion with the hopes that more evidence would show up. They found a damaged suitcase that could have been linked, never was confirmed, to MH370. It would have been consistent with the models of the debris dispersal. That was what I was trying to say, the debris dispersal. They also found a Chinese water bottle and an Indonesian cleaning product in the same area. Not really hard evidence, you can't really...
Right.
But late February 2016, almost 2 years later, an object bearing a stenciled label of "No Step" was found off of the coast of Mozambique, about 1,200 miles southwest of where the flaperon had been found the previous July. You know, when you look out on the plane in the window, you see the little piece that says "No Step."
Yes.
It tells the people working on the plane, don't step on this.
Yeah.
So that's basically what it was. It was a little piece that had that "No Step."
Okay.
Early photographic analysis did suggest that it could have come from MH370's horizontal stabilizer or from the leading edges of the wings. This was confirmed when Australian authorities examined and identified the piece. Now that this is back in the news again, American adventurist Blaine Gibson went to Mozambique and to Madagascar and found nearly 20 pieces of debris that were considered, quote-unquote, high probability to have come from MH370, and including the piece that had the "No Step" on it.
Mm-hmm.
The most significant piece that he found was a frame of the screen that is located on the back of the seat, in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
The frame that has the screen inside of it. So he found the frame.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically was a modern-day Indiana Jones, kind of, trying to find all of this information. Mm-hmm. So when this hit the news that Blaine Gibson found more, a gentleman named Liam Lauter came forward with a piece of debris that he found on the beach in southern Mozambique. It was in the news again. He's like, "I think I found a piece too. I'll turn it in." Mm. It was flown to Australia for analysis. It carried a stenciled code 676EB, which identified it as being part of a Boeing 777 flap track fairing. Don't ask me what that is. And the style of lettering actually matched the stencils used by Malaysian Airlines, concluding they were, quote-unquote, almost certain it came from MH370. So March 7th, 2016, more debris is found, possibly from the aircraft. It was found on Réunion Aziz Kaprawi, Malaysia's deputy transport minister, said that, quote, an unidentified gray item with a blue border might be linked to 370, end quote. But both Malaysian and Australian authorities, according to the search in the southern Indian Oceans, sent teams to verify whether or not the debris was from the missing aircraft. March 21st, 2016, South African archaeologist Niels Kruger found a gray piece of debris near Mossel Bay, South Africa, that had an unmistakable partial logo of a Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce is a manufacturer of the aircraft's engine. So it had like the little logo, partial logo of Rolls-Royce that was identified on this piece of equipment.
Okay.
Essentially. So it looked like it could have been part of the aircraft's engine. The Malaysian Ministry of Transportation acknowledged that this piece could have been that of an engine cowling. An additional piece of possible debris suggested to have come from the interior of the aircraft was then found on the island of Margaritas, I don't know, in late March. Then on 11th of May 2016, Australian authorities determined that 2 additional pieces of debris were almost certainly from Flight 370. So, you know, anywhere between 1.5 to 2 years.
Yeah.
Like all of these pieces of debris are starting to arrive. And that's partially because of essentially where the model for the debris, like basically they said, if the Inmarsat is correct, in this area right here is where we think MH370 went down. By the models showing where debris would have floated to, these are the areas that you can probably go and look for to see if debris washes up on the beach. So essentially that's what's happening now. Taking, you know, 1.5 to 2 years, finally making its way.
Yeah, yeah. That's where Nuggy and Squishy are going. They're going to the island of Margaritas.
I like it. Or just say Australia.
Australia.
Let's go to Australia. I'll go diving in the Great Barrier Reef. Okay, more debris. June 24, 2016, the Australian Transport Minister said a piece of aircraft debris had been found on Pemba Island off of the coast of Tanzania. It was handed over to authorities so that experts from Malaysia could determine its origin. 20 July, Australian government released photographs of the piece, saying it was believed to have been an outboard flap from one of the aircraft's wings. Malaysia's Transport Ministry confirmed on 15 September that this piece of debris was indeed from the missing aircraft. November 21st, 2016, families of the victims announced that they would actually carry out a search of their own to find debris in December 2016 on the island of Madagascar. By November 30th, 5 additional pieces of debris were recovered between that time frame on the Malagasy coast and believed by victims' relatives to have been actually from MH370. All the pieces have been handed over to Malaysian Transportation Minister. Now, with all the discovery of all this debris popping up, the families of the lost passengers had to face the fact that their loved ones were not coming home.
Yeah.
While most of the family members did succumb to this horrible tragedy, others still didn't believe it. One of them was Intan Othman, the Malaysian Airlines flight attendant whose husband was on board. Her initial reaction was, quote, "Who planted it there? Who brought this piece there?"
Wow.
End quote.
Yeah.
Now, when the debris was found, it discounted the hijacking scenario that Jeff Wise laid out, wherein the Inmarsat data was maliciously altered, indicating the plane might have gone north, like ended up in Kazakhstan. Oh, I said Kazakhstan. When clearly it did go south. However, he still hung on to the theory that if this happened, the Russians would have planted the debris.
Yeah, I kind of think that. Kind of.
Now, if this is true, this actually would not be the first time that Russia planted false aircraft debris to mislead investigators.
You know what messes me up is that for what you just said there, like, I kind of feel like that's what's going on. And also that Mr. B, I think he was a Russian agent trying to change the narrative, throwing in the Americans. Like, it was the Americans. Don't look here. It's the Americans. Like, they did it. They knew.
I didn't even think of that. But he kind of comes up again later, so...
Okay.
So hold on to that. So the previous incident where Russia was known to have planted false aircraft debris was in 1983 when Korean Airlines Flight 007, I love that,
I love
007, had 269 people on board and was in flight from New York to Seoul, Korea, and they went through Anchorage, Alaska, and Tokyo. The Department of State said that the plane was shot down near Soviet Sakhalin Island. I don't know what that is, but Japanese monitoring the plane, essentially, showed that Soviet jets were controlled from the ground when they shot the plane down. And as Americans and Japanese were actually looking for the black box and looking for the wreckage, the Soviets planted, and this was known, that they planted false acoustic pingers on the seabed to mislead their efforts. So if it happened before, is it possible that it happened again? So Jeff Wise, in his investigation, found links between Russia and the American adventurist who found a majority of the debris, Blaine Gibson. He was able to pull registration records that showed that Blaine set up a company with 2 Russian business partners in the early 90s, and Jeff also found that Blaine was in the Soviet Union when it collapsed and was fluent in Russia.
Okay, all right.
Ghislaine Waterlos, the French citizen, also found the story of Blaine finding most of the debris. He thought it was odd. Blaine spent only 2 hours on the beach before finding the very first piece of debris on a deserted beach in the middle of nowhere, conveniently.
Yeah.
Right? So, and also an English-speaking news media outlet was also there, catching this on tape.
Very suspicious. And what was the name of that person, that special agent that they had this weird interaction with? Was that Mr. B?
That was Mr. B, yeah.
Like so Blaine?
Ghislaine. No. Oh, no. I doubt, no. Well, Blaine actually also has been, and I can't remember if I put it in here or not. Yeah, I have it up here real quick. In the Netflix documentary, Blaine retorted this accusation and said, quote, "I very much doubt that Jeff Wise would go on Netflix and accuse me of being a Russian spy. He has absolutely no basis for that, and he knows that it would be very serious defamation," end quote. And he said that he was accused of other ridiculous things that were horrible but laughable. And he, like, to include being a spy, a sex trafficker, a human organ trafficker, all kinds of things that he was being accused of. So, don't know. Now, Jeff Wise didn't have any solid proof that Blaine was connected to the Russian intelligence or actually planted the debris. But others were also suspicious of Blaine, including Ghislaine, was Florence, the French newspaper reporter. She called him the king of debris. She gave him zero credibility to what he found. And when you look at the debris, they said that the pieces were highly likely to be part of this. And when they said highly likely, it meant that they were not able to 100% confirm, to prove or disprove that it was part of MH370. That's basically they're guessing that it's possible. Now, authorities had confirmed that the flaperon was part of the MH370, the first piece of debris, because it had the serial number on it. And she was very eager to look at that in detail. The more Florence dug, the more she found. The flaperon was missing an identification plate. There is a metallic part that should have been on the flaperon, and it's either riveted or glued on with a very specific resin, and it's expected to withstand pressure, atmosphere, humidity, heat, cold, and stay on. Now, Florence found that there was only one reason that this identification plate was taken off, and that's when a plane is dismantled. So the fact that the ID plate was missing was a huge red flag. So did the piece actually come from a dismantled plane? Did the piece of the flaperon come from a dismantled plane? Because there was no ID plate on it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it came from like a plane junkyard just to kind of,
Was it planted?
It was planted.
Investigators then tried to look for other reference numbers to identify where the debris came from. Serial numbers from the flaperon were sent to the manufacturer to search, through their records. And in all, investigators sent 12 separate numbers to the manufacturer. Of the 12, only one actually was found to be a match, and that was 3 Foxtrot Zulu Golf 8-1. Was this enough to establish, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this flaperon was in fact MH370's flaperon? Despite that possibility, the official narrative was that it was confirmed to be part of MH370.
Right.
Prime Minister Najib Razak conducted a press conference and said, quote, "It is with a heavy heart I must tell you that an international team of experts have conclusively confirmed that the aircraft debris found on Reunion Island is indeed from MH370, end quote. There were other things confirming that this was a piece of the missing aircraft, such as the same paint that was used when it was tested, and that it was in the only crash in the area. Ghislaine Walteros, however, felt this proof was weak, and he wasn't convinced. December 2nd, 2016, 1,000 days since MH370 disappeared. Groups of family members of the lost passengers went to Madagascar with Blaine to go find the debris. Now, Danica Weeks, her husband, was on board, and she was Team Blaine. She's like, I think it's unfair how he's being treated. As a family member of somebody who has lost somebody, she felt his intentions were good, and she was happy that he wanted to continue to look for more debris as long as he could. This is like independent investigation and searches and stuff, but the official search continued for a couple years. In trying to locate the final resting place of MH370 in the 120 square kilometer area of the southern Indian Ocean. The longer they searched, the more certain they felt that they would find something. Like something.
Anything.
Anything. Peter Foley was the lead of the search team. He met with the next of kin and assured them that they were going to do everything that they could to find the aircraft and bring the loved ones home. They just needed to persevere and they needed to continue. Ghislaine, however, felt that there was no way that they would ever find it.
Oh.
He didn't think the plane was even there in the southern Indian Ocean.
Yeah. Oh.
Now, at this point, there's still no answers as to what happened. It could still be the pilot. It could still be hijackers. Then, a new report comes out suggesting the pilot who flew MH370 did in fact fly a similar route on his home simulator just a month before it went down. So if you remember, Captain Zahiri had a flight simulator in his home, and it was taken into evidence. Like, they went and pulled the hard drives and everything. It's not uncommon for pilots who really love to fly to have home simulators.
Right.
But if he did fly the same route that was on the simulator, that was the same route the MH370 flew, how is it possible that he's innocent? Like, it's circumstantial, but really, you know?
Yeah, that's shady.
Yeah. So the hard drives that were collected, they were collected as evidence by the investigators, and then...
One thing, though. So this evidence came out 1,000 days, like you said, after the plane went missing.
We're about to get to it.
And they're... Okay.
Yep. You are on it, girl.
I like the story because I'm learning so much, and I have not... Just so you know, I refuse to watch the documentary until after you tell me the story.
Okay. So the hard drives were collected, and they were handed over to the FBI as soon as it was. So if you remember, it was within at least a month that his home simulator was taken as evidence.
Right.
2 years later, there's a report. Through the thorough analysis of the hard drives by the FBI, they were able to find data points. The data points were from a simulator that indicated the plane flew a route up the Malacca Strait and then down, so making that U-turn, up the Malacca Strait and then down into the southern Indian Ocean.
Right.
Until the fuel ran out. And on the simulator, it would have been estimated at the same area where the MH370 was assumed to have run out of fuel. And now a lot of people thought this was going to be the smoking gun. But the analysis also determined that the simulated flight path that was actually manually changed, perhaps by a manual override or a mouse click. So basically, Captain Zahiri repositioned the simulated flight path by moving his cursor, moving it on the map, and ending it in the Southern Ocean. So he didn't actually fly this on the simulator. He manually moved it.
Okay.
Which is even more odd to me, personally. Okay. I think that's even more funky.
I don't even know what that looks like, so...
I have pictures.
Okay.
I'll have pictures of the suspected flight path that MH370 was in compared to Zahiri's simulator.
Okay.
So there's a picture, it's going to be on the Patreon on there. But he didn't actually fly this route in the simulator, he just put it there with his mouse, essentially. He didn't fly it. Like, there was no data to show that the simulator was ran. It was like you take your mouse and you kind of click. It's like when you look on a map and you click on something on the map.
Yeah, okay.
You don't actually drive there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of that's kind of what it's going on.
Okay.
So he didn't actually fly this in the simulator. He just put his mouse there. He just ended his, a practice flight there. And this turned out to be just hundreds of miles away from the search area. So is this a matter of they're seeing what they want to see because they want an answer? Still, it's quite odd that you would have a flight simulation data manually added or otherwise changed that would end with fuel exhaustion in the middle of the southern Indian Ocean.
Right.
I just think that's so freaking weird.
It is weird. Now, this flight simulator he had at home, this is set up like a personal PC.
Yeah.
With like maybe a couple of monitors, and it's like a driving, like you're pretending to go somewhere, right? It's something like that. That's not, it's now with these is this like is this a program that the Malaysia airport could see on the back ends of what he was? No, this is a personal thing.
It's all private.
Private. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So why would they wait 2 years to release this information when they really had it so early on? So Ghislaine, remember, he was the one that met with Mr. B, was extremely suspicious now, and he thought the FBI was up to something.
No, not those guys. Never them.
He theorized, once again, that the Americans were involved. Now, what did the FBI do with the information for the last 2 years? Both Ghislaine and his lawyer felt that Malaysia was the scapegoat, that the FBI shared the information with Malaysia, and they both just decided to keep it quiet. The Americans led the investigation with Malaysia. The British were locating the plane with the Inmarsat data, and the Australians were leading the search. All of these countries were working together as if they were saying, and this is what Ghislaine was thinking, like as if they were saying, nothing to see here, move on.
Yeah.
Like they're giving it a good old college try, but you don't see anything here.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, as an investigative journalist, Florence and others were just expected to believe what authorities were saying in their official narrative. But there was no proof. They had nothing. They had nothing of what they were saying. The official narrative was that MH370 flew over 6 countries in 6 different airspaces: Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and eventually Australia. Yet not a single one of those countries were able to produce radar images.
Oh, bullshit. BS.
Despite the fact that Malaysia said they saw MH370 do a U-turn, right? The Malaysian Air Force said they saw it on their military radar. The plane did a U-turn, and it flew back over Malaysia. But they've never actually, they said it happened, but they never actually shown it. The evidence of the plane doing the U-turn. Now, maybe by now they actually have, because they had some things like on the documentary and some other images and research that I've seen. Unless that is just the official narrative that they're saying.
Right.
I don't know. It's hard to say. But the key elements of the investigation basically are just what is being said and not based on truth. So why would anybody actually believe the official narrative if there's nothing to back it up?
No. And also, that flight simulator that they held for 2 years, couldn't they manipulate the information on it?
Sure.
The FBI to be like, look, let's prove that there was a U-turn. Let's prove and create.
Well,
they could do anything, right? I mean, they're the FBI.
Well, we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of that.
All right.
So Florence found another interesting point, that MH370 supposedly flew over an airbase called Butterworth. It's in Malaysia, but it's under Australian command. So it's an Australian base in Malaysia. They flew over this airbase. So the fact that a rogue 777 flew over an airbase without immediately triggering some sort of response, an interception, jets in the air. I mean, the bases that I've been to, you get those. They're there on.
And this is like when you say airbase, you mean like a military airbase?
Yeah, military airbase. Yes,
named Butterworth. That's named a great name. I love it. Okay.
But there should be some sort of alert.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But nothing happened. And if MH370 flew over, if they're telling us that it did a U-turn and flew back over this Australian base in Malaysia, and nothing happened? All of this. In addition, there was a huge military exercise going on in the area at the time of MH370's disappearance, to include the United States. An incredible concentration of military power. So this big joint exercises are absolutely huge. I don't know if you've ever they're huge. Yeah. So one of these was going on in the area. An incredible concentration of military power in this region. And then a Boeing 777 goes missing. No. So Florence said, quote, "It's even more inconceivable that we would lose it on such a highly monitored region of the world," end quote. So the only information now that they have still found credible was the Inmarsat pings. How? Why? So she looked into Inmarsat, trying to figure out a lot more about Inmarsat. They have a specific branch called Inmarsat Government, and this provides services to the militaries of the biggest powers in the world, including the United States. And Florence alluded that the data provided by Inmarsat could have been engineered or fabricated in order to provide a cover-up of what truly happened to MH370. Oh. And in her opinion, MH370 never turned around. It never did that U-turn. So whatever happened, it happened in the South China Sea. Now, if you remember, last week we talked about the lady who found debris.
Yeah.
Cindy Hendry, she was what they're called tom nodders.
Right.
Basically, they use this tom nod platform to view high resolution images. Mm-hmm. And within days of the aircraft disappearing, she lives in Florida. She was online and she was trying to help. So if you signed up to be a tom nodder, you would get a certain region to look at, and you would just look at picture after picture after picture of black or, ocean and nothing. But she did find some evidence of debris, if you remember from last week. Cindy searched in that area, the more she found, and she was certain this is where MH370 ended up, in the South China Sea just off of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. If you remember from last week, she tried to share as much information as she could after the Malaysian government announced that the plane did a U-turn and they were going to remove their assets from the South China Sea.
Right.
Then move it to the southern. And she's like, no, don't do that. I found debris. Florence knew this, found that Cindy had discovered this debris, and she contacted Cindy. Cindy told Florence that we need to remember that there was an oil rig worker that found that he saw a fire in the sky that night in the South China Sea. The Cathay pilots also said they found a large debris field in the South China Sea. So Florence then told Cindy that she had talked to several other people and they were saying the same thing. And Cindy was just one more person to add into that there must have been a cover-up of some sort that night. So Florence decided she's looking into it. She's looking into the theory and began looking at the cargo manifest. So, I mean, if it went down in the South China Sea, if there was some sort of military interference, that's not part of the official narrative.
Right.
Why? So she looked at the cargo manifest. There were 2.5 tons of electronics listed as things like walkie-talkies, radio accessories, and other things like that. That was loaded onto MH370. Now, this equipment was delivered plainside without being screened, and it was under escort. What kind of equipment was this, right?
Yeah.
And it's public knowledge. Remember, they were going from Lumpur to Beijing. Mm-hmm. It's public knowledge that China is very eager and does everything they can to acquire highly sensitive U.S. technology and surveillance equipment, such as like stealth drone technology. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that this was in the middle of what actually happened to MH370? Florence also has a theory. And as she theorized that the U.S. basically might have found out that MH370 was actually carrying this technology in its cargo to China and did their utmost to stop the cargo from arriving. And then she remembered what Ghislaine told her, that the information from Mr. B, that the 2 Airwax planes were involved. Florence found another source, a former U.S. Air Force member who said that the AWACS jamming capabilities are phenomenal. And that's when she realized that the AWACS had the capability to completely jam MH370's communication system, making it disappear from radar.
Really?
So now she has a technical explanation of the how and the why that maybe for MH370 and why it disappeared. So she put together this theory called the intercept.
Oh my God, give me chills. Okay.
March 7, 2014, 11:20 p.m. Passengers get, you load about an hour before the plane on international flights. So the electronics cargo then is also loaded onto the plane under escort without being scanned. The plane takes off as planned March 8th at 12:41 a.m. And as it's reaching its cruising altitude, this is when we know that the captain called in to inform air traffic control that they've reached the cruising altitude. Everything's completely normal. 1:19 in the morning, MH370 was asked to be turned over from Malaysian air traffic control to Vietnamese air traffic controllers. This is that space of no man's land, that gray area, no contact at all with air traffic control. This is a perfect moment for an interception to take place, according to Florence. It's possible in that moment that the 2 AWACS move into action, jam the MH370's communications, making it disappear from radar. Now, MH370 cannot communicate. Maybe it received an order from the AWACS and that told Captain Zahiri to land.
Right. Turn around. Land.
Go to this place. Do something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
If Captain Zahiri, maybe he declined the order. And maybe the captain continued to fly his route to Beijing. Tension would have been very high and increased as Zahiri basically refused the orders, right? So as the MH370 approached Chinese airspace, the AWACS had to back off. They couldn't fly into Chinese airspace. As difficult as it might seem, they still needed to stop the cargo from entering China. So Florence, she thought there might have been a missile strike, maybe a midair collision, and maybe that's where MH370 met its fate.
Yeah.
Florence admits that this sounds incredibly far-fetched, that it does have some loose ends, but she thinks it's much more closer to the truth than what the official narrative is. So what do you think?
I think she's right.
So what if Florence's theory of the intercept happened and the pieces of the plane were then planted?
I think that's probably what happens.
You do?
I do. Yeah. I do. Because you're right. Because you know what? We're too sophisticated not to know where this plane is. We're too sophisticated. Nothing can disappear on this earth.
Yep.
Seriously. Yep. And I don't know.
The other day I watched this show, Where the Oceans Disappear or something like that. It's like a history documentary type of thing where sunken ships and planes that are in the ocean kind of thing, they are, with technology, are able to remove like the water so they can get like a look and stuff at it. So they tried to do this for MH370. Well, of course they can't find the plane, so they don't know what it looks like.
Right.
But there were some interesting theories also that they included on that. And one of the individuals who was doing the search for it did a search on several other ones where they found planes, and they kind of did a model of this other crash on what it would look like. I think it was a French airline that went down that they were able to recover. And he was also working on the MH370, but of course they can't find it, so there was nothing, on there or whatever. But it was really interesting also to watch that one.
I gotta check that out. But I think she's onto something, because think about it. The U.S., our air and sea capabilities are unmatched, and the bottom line is, if there was something of significance on that plane, then we needed to prevent it from getting it to its destination. And we did do something like that where we had to neutralize it, right? Who's going, at that point, Malaysia's holding the red hot potato saying, I know what happened here, but I cannot say the U.S. did it, or I'll be at war with the U.S. Australia's going, the U.S. is my friend because I ain't going to need them. Everybody else is saying, we're not going to call out the U.S. If they did something, we all got to kind of be a united front. I could see that freaking happening. I could totally see that happening.
It's possible. I don't know.
Listen, if you did something, I would be like, I didn't see a damn thing. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. It's over there. It's over there.
I don't even have to tell you what happened. You're like, I'll be there, and I'll bring my shovel.
Right. Did you not see that Russian run by it? That was that Russian.
Well, Blaine Gibson, the American adventurer who found most of the pieces of debris, actually disputed Florence's theory. If MH370 did in fact go down over the South China Sea, there would be debris all over the area, he said, with the South China Sea, the Gulf of Thailand, and it would mean that the radar showing the plane that turned around was wrong. Maybe it was manipulated. And that the Inmarsat data was wrong. Maybe that was manipulated. But basically denying... So Blaine was saying that Florence, with her theory, is denying that all of this evidence exists. Could all of these countries come together and conspire a cover-up? There's a lot of countries involved. Somebody might talk.
I think somebody is talking, but I think the powers that the major powers at play here. I mean, you know what it is? It's like when you want to hide something, you hide it in plain sight.
Sure.
It's like it's there, the information is there, but who's going to point the finger? Not one country is going to point the finger,
right?
Because the bottom line is, the adversary is China.
Yeah.
So it's a communist country. I don't know.
Now countries are allies. I mean,
I'm having a hot flash just thinking about it.
Wars have been started over.
Right, exactly.
Over disputes, yeah.
And nobody wants to do that.
So the official search ended initially January 17th, 2017, almost 3 years after its disappearance. And they only said that it was stopping until further credible evidence was found. They said that they would suspend the search, but basically it was expensive.
Yeah.
And they're kind of and I sympathize, I guess, or empathize with the family members. Like, you want closure.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't know if that would ever
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, it's
I don't
like,
know that we ever get any. I don't. They're by now. I mean, they're not going to have a body to bury.
no, and it's terrible, but it's almost like Area 51.
Mm.
We know it exists. They won't admit it exists, but
They
it's
did admit it.
literally right in front. Well, recently, like I mean, like for as long as this, at one point they were like, "We don't know what you're talking about. It's an enormous place. It's
Yeah.
there."
Yeah.
And it's just so secret. Like, yeah, they can hide things that are just in plain sight, and it's unfortunate because this,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It's terrible.
Well,
Well, I mean, what would you think if it was hijacked and then taken hostage? That would not be a better outcome at
mm-mm,
this point.
mm-mm.
So,
Yeah. Peter said the one that was the lead of the search
yeah.
out in the southern Indian Ocean, he said that he felt that they let the family down and felt bad that they actually had to suspend the search because they didn't find anything. And he felt his team let the families down. So, July 2018, 4 years and 4 months later, investigators released the final report of the investigation. And it said the plane was airworthy. It met all the checks.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot was also very competent, had no signs of stress or behavioral changes. But it said they cannot rule out any unlawful interference by a third party.
Yeah.
So they basically said that it wasn't Captain Sahiri. They said they're not able to determine with any certainty the reasons that the aircraft went down and why it was so far from its flight plan. They don't know why. Well, that's the official narrative. But this is frustrating to the families that no one is able to answer any questions, at least publicly. And Intan Offman also said that at least when they came out with the report, it was a good thing that Captain Sahiri was no longer being accused.
Yeah.
That for bringing down MH370. Ghislaine also said it was obvious that it wasn't the pilot. He didn't think it was Captain Sahiri either. And he added that the good thing about the French judicial system is that they can't stop. The Malaysian government might have stopped their search, but the French judicial system can't stop their investigation. They're not allowed to stop until they find the truth. And he said if it takes 10 years, then it takes 10 years.
Wow. Good.
Yeah. So March 2019, in the wake of the 5th anniversary of the disappearance, the Malaysian government stated that it was willing to look at any, quote, credible leads or specific proposals, end quote, regarding a new search. Dutch-based Frugro and an American company, Ocean Infinity, said that they were ready to resume. They actually, in 2018, did do a search with no findings, but they were ready to resume on a no-find, no-fee basis,
Okay.
believing that it would benefit from the experience that it had gained from its search. Argentinian submarine called the ARA San Juan and a bulk ship carrier called Stellar Daisy that gained a lot of experience since they initially tried to look for MH370, found these other items in the deep sea. So they got a little bit more experience. And then they were planning to continue on their next search either 2023 or 2024. It's the last I saw. The Ocean Infinity company, that's the same company that was on that documentary that I watched where the ocean, when the waters disappear or whatever that documentary is called. Yeah. That's Ocean Infinity was on there too. Now, the only thing that can be reasonably determined from the disappearance of Flight MH370 is that it was an intentional act. Part of the mystery is the actual location of the plane. It's tangible. It's real. It actually exists somewhere. It doesn't just disappear.
No.
The other part of the mystery is who did it. But that we may never know. At least in the unforeseeable future.
Yeah.
Are there people out there who actually know what happened? I think so. Somebody knows something. But for now, the families remain hopeful, and the families do deserve to know the truth.
Yes, they do. Rest in peace.
Story.
Oh my God. So I have a follow-up question. So, okay. So obviously, there were pilots flying those AWACS. AWACS. They were flying those AWACS. So of course there were people that know. But the cell phones on the plane, I remember early in the story part 1, you said that they did have a phone call. Somebody got a phone call saying, but then they missed the call or something.
Yeah.
The AWACS, can they scramble those signals as well? They scramble everything. Can they scramble everything on that plane? You can't ping it no matter what? Because I'm assuming if you call,
I don't know.
we should call this lady and ask her, or write her a letter and say, hey,
I don't know.
But isn't that, like, curious? Like, how powerful are these AWACS? Like, how powerful are they? Can they look it up, a freaking a huge Boeing airplane and wipe it completely, the signal transmission, they could just wipe it out. That's how powerful they are. And if we don't have that answer, they probably are. They probably don't want us to know it. And you're probably not allowed to say anything. So we're just going to leave it there. Yeah.
Is it possible? Anything is possible.
I do not doubt the sophistication of our Navy, our Air Force, by any stretch of the imagination. Seriously.
I mean, I personally have never been on board at AWACS. I've seen them. I've seen them from the outside. I'm aware of some of their capabilities. I don't really, honestly, I can't say yes or no to that answer. And I probably wouldn't even
after the story. I am going to do two things. One, I'm going to research what the hell an AWACS looks like. I need to see one of these planes because I think I know what you're talking about.
I have some pictures. I think I have some pictures.
Got like a satellite dish. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a gray and white plane. Yep.
What do you think happened?
Oh Lord, if the debris was planted, it's not like they just appeared, right? Just one day, all of this debris started showing up.
Right.
They had to have been placed somewhere, whether maybe it was miles off land, to make its way to land. But somebody had to have seen it. You know what I mean? Somebody had to have seen this plane dropping a variety of debris in. You know what I mean? Right. Like that's suspicious. Like I'm thinking like, you know, the big C-130s that drop cargo, you know, down. Like, right. You're going to see something, I don't know, maybe they were far enough out.
Unless you are a military grade, I don't know the different planes that the military has, but maybe it's some type of stealth military thing that you can kind of go sweep and drop it and move out. Just sprinkle some evidence around and get the hell out of there.
I don't know. So there's some things that I'm like, I don't see that being feasible without somebody actually seeing it.
Either way, everybody is being very specifically vague. It's specifically vague. Like, there are very real things happening here.
I don't know why they were, other than what was on the military radar. By the way, it took them a couple days to release that, remember? So they wasted time and resources in the southern China Sea before announcing that it had done this U-turn. I'm not convinced there's nothing in the South China Sea.
Oh, you think there is? You think the plane is there?
Well, I'm not convinced there's not.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, is it possible that there's not? Sure, but prove it.
Yeah. And do you think the plane was fired upon? Like, eliminated as a threat? Oh.
I do. Yeah. I think that it was... I don't know if it's over this equipment. I mean, it's quite possible. I do know that there's programs out there to protect our technology from getting into the hands of the enemy, essentially. Yeah. Which they will do very sneaky things to get it.
I bet.
Yeah. So I don't know that would be a reason to possibly, but I don't know. I think it was shot down.
This story leaves more questions because now I'm thinking about it. Because now after this, I'm gonna immediately go to. Is it on Netflix now? Yeah. And I could probably YouTube a lot of like clips from it.
You can.
Oh, I got it.
So I will also say that there's too much out there.
There is.
I did a lot of research. Obviously, it's a 2-part series. It's a 2-part story. But not humanly possible to take it all. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then be able to regurgitate and spit it out back to you. So it's not everything, so don't at me, y'all. I get it.
Oh, well, thank you for doing that.
It's crazy.
Incredibly hard story that I would never be able to get my brain wrapped around. My brain would have stalled out on page 2. Seriously.
My brain is putt-putting at the
moment. It's putt-putting?
So. It's like putt-putt. Pitter-patter.
All right, well, because we don't want to leave you hanging, chatters, for more information on this case, please check out After That Crime Chat, only available on our Patreon.
And don't forget to follow us, Crime Chat with Nat and Kat, on our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter, or X. See what we got going on.
Remember, Crime Chat with Nat and Kat. When you become a VIP chatter to our Patreon, you'll have bonus episodes, behind the scenes, bloopers, and free merch. So come check out some merch in the works for season 3.
Yes, and check out our next episode. It's the one before Christmas.
Yes.
Oh, it's beginning to sound a lot like Christmas.
You don't want to miss it. So
we'll see you next time on the CrimeChat. Bye!